Hello, everybody. I just want to say very quickly before we start this podcast, I had a slight issue with the sound gear somewhere around the 2-hour mark. Just again, had an issue with the sound gear. Basically, equipment failure. I looked down and it said error. This gear has stopped recording. There's a spot there where the audio goes from this nice microphone and the nice audio sound to just the sound off the camera. I think it lasts about 15 or 20 minutes and then it goes back to the good sound. So sorry about that. But yeah, it's pretty short and it happens right in the middle of a pretty, sorry, my voice is blowing out from just doing this 3-hour podcast. It happens right in the middle of a big deep dive on some super crazy stuff, dog training stuff. Pretty big Q&A this one. I tackle some pretty big topics and some sort of new philosophies and ideas that I've been working on recently in dog training. There's also a lot of good sort of straightforward stuff in there as well from some great questions. But that's it. Little sound issue there. Dips down, goes to the camera sound for about 15 minutes and then goes back to the good gear. Cheers, guys. Over to the podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Big Game Indicating Dogs Q&A. These Q&As are held from questions from people who are in the Big Game Indicating Dogs Inner Circle. And the Big Game Indicating Dogs Inner Circle is a closed Facebook group of people who are following the Deer Dog Training Blueprint. And the Deer Dog Training Blueprint is a 12-part, 15-hour video series where I filmed everything that I did to train my own deer dog from start to finish. You can find out more about Big Game Indicating Dogs and the Deer Dog Training Blueprint at biggameindicatingdogs.com, and you can follow us at Big Game Indicating Dogs on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. There's loads of posts and information and videos and photos at all of those places. Go and check it out. Right, let's get into this Q&A. Question number 1. I don't have a name on this one for some reason. These are from my notes. I put together a heap of notes to do these Q&As every time. So the first question, I'm in Australia, and have many kangaroos and wallabies that frequent my property and my hunting areas. Actually, they pretty much frequent every open space around here. Lots of kangaroos. Should I undertake my pup's initial training in a paddock where kangaroos, etc. have been? I'm wondering if this will help the dog learn to ignore the scent or if it would provide unwanted distractions. So my note on this is that's arguably good. I mean, training in an area with kangaroos. It's arguably good as long as the kangaroos aren't creating a distraction that is constantly pulling away from your training. So, you know what? It's exactly that. If there's a lot of kangaroos around and you don't want your dog to target them, raising and training your dog in an area that kangaroos kick around, and so there's kangaroo scent on the ground. Occasionally your dog sees a kangaroo in the distance. You completely ignore it. Anytime your dog does pay attention to it, you either just redirect the dog with a change of direction. If your dog starts to show too much interest, you can even give it command of disapproval and turn it away. We go over, I just got to pull the plug out of this thing. We go over non-target species aversion training in the Deer Dog Training Blueprint later on in there. We show you how we do it in New Zealand to distract dogs away from, so we basically teaching them not to target things like possums and rabbits, and we go over how to apply those techniques and principles to basically any animal all around. You might be in Australia with kangaroos, you might be in America with raccoons or beavers or whatever's in the area that you're hunting that you don't want your dog to target. So basically what I'm saying here is it's definitely not a bad thing. Like, if you're watching the blueprint and you see those paddocks that I am raising and training Print in, there's quite a few rabbits in those paddocks and pukekos and things, and they just become part of the background, part of the atmosphere, and the dog starts to tune them out. Anyone training in town, you're going to run into cats. Here I'm at the beach, so there's seagulls, other dogs, all that sort of stuff. So again, it's not necessarily a bad thing as long as it's not like totally over the top and you're in some area where it's just crazy and kangaroos are exploding out from behind trees and it's just too full on and it's constantly pulling away and distracting and making training difficult. Again, we talk about doing, particularly early on, we talk about doing a training in a zero distraction environment with a young pup just to get the ball rolling, always setting them up for success. But as the dog gets older, it's actually good. And we go over that in the blueprint, how to start introducing more and more distraction. So that's my take on it, man. Again, the super short answer, it's actually arguably good to train your dog where there's a few kangaroos, if there's going to be kangaroos in the hunting environment that you don't want to target, as long as they're not creating this super over-the-top distraction. Occasionally is okay too. If there is kangaroos around, occasionally you just walk around the corner and one takes off and the pup's a little bit surprised by it or distracted by it. Just keep it chill. Redirect the dog. If the pup or dog shows too much interest, command a disapproval, maybe a light check on the long line. If it's the situation is correct for that, and just move on. It shouldn't be a huge issue, It really shouldn't. Second question, I have the very rare, the very occasional deer travel through my property, and I know you mentioned it's not ideal to train where your dog is likely to encounter deer. That's for the exact same reason as what we're talking about with the kangaroos, or what Print had with the rabbits, where I raised and trained them. As a side note on that, it's funny to see things later on, or it's cool and interesting to see things later on in life with your dog, where you just see all of that training pay off, and just doing everything correctly, and some of those sort of lifestyle management effects kicking in like that. Just a good training setup where Print was raised and trained in a way everything was managed. He was never set up to fail. He's basically never broken and chased, and he actually never has. Print has never broken and chased an animal. He's sort of, and this is later on in the blueprint in part 12, when down south that roaring stag walks right up to us in the river flats, big open river flats, and I'm sitting down in the rocks. I've got the dogs on a stop. Print's out in front of me, and the stag just walks right up to us, eventually wins us and turns around and runs off. And Print just, you can see him thinking about it. He slowly stands up and just sort of starts to walk, and then almost starts to trot to follow up on the stag. And I just say, Print, and he sits down. And he just sort of got a bit of a walk, started to trot, probably covered about 5 meters. Print! Command of disapproval. Print's just stuck his head in the door like, what the hell have I done now? Good boy. Good boy. You're right, mate. That's the closest he's ever got to breaking on anything. And going back, tying all this together, the other day I had Print and Miko, and we were scouting some geese walking around in these paddocks. And Print was sort of, there was basically a freedom session for the dogs. It was just like walking through the dunes here. They were just sort of cruising around within 10 or 20 meters. I was having to give Miko the odd command to keep her in as she wanted to range out a bit further. There were lots of big hares there. I actually want to go back down and bomb some of them up, either sort of long range with some of the big center fires, sort of varmint style, or even just jump shooting with the shotgun, because I was sort of walking around this long grass and these big hares were getting up and running off. And Print's sort of 5 yards in front of me, and this big, and Miko's sort of, he was 5 yards in front and a little bit off to the right, sort of at my 2 o'clock. And Miko's out to my left, and this big old hare sitting in the grass in front of us, just thinking, shit, what way do I run here? And he got up and he ran. He got up right in front of me and ran probably about 1 or 2 meters off Print's nose on a 45-degree angle right across in front of him. And Print just stood there and literally just watched, like his head just turned, just followed the hare, and Print just stood there and watched this hare just run like 1.5 meters right across his nose. He didn't even flinch. He didn't even lean to go, nothing. He just like watched it run past and was just waiting to see, just that's how it went down, and that's how, that's what Print's like when deer are running around in front of us now. That steadiness. But, Miko will track rabbits and stuff because I haven't done that aversion training with her. I've even shot a few rabbits with her around. Print, however, growing up in that area with rabbits in it and training in it and then doing the aversion training to them, and I've never shot rabbits with Print around. He doesn't track them, doesn't take any notice, and one can run straight across right in front of him. He won't even pay any attention to it. The deer, he'll hunt them like crazy, but is also, if one runs across in front of him, he won't break. And then when I give my go command, he'll track it or follow it up or do whatever there. But what I'm getting around to here, what I'm laying the foundation for is, so this can work for you in 2 ways. It's quite cool that these questions are back to back here, and they sort of tie together, is that if you do your training with kangaroos or rabbits and you ignore them, the dog will start ignoring kangaroos and rabbits, basically non-target species aversion training. However, if there's deer hanging around in your training area, even just walking through at night, so there's deer scent on the ground and then you're training in that area, the dog will learn to tune that scent out as well, and now you're training a deer dog to basically not follow deer scent. So it is, and it can be, or it is, a very, very important part of training a hunting dog is to do the majority of your training in the absence of the scent of the game that you eventually want to hunt and target with that dog. Because sort of even unintentionally having that dog around on the scent of deer and not following it up on it is training that dog to tune it out. So 100%, 1000%, the best case scenario is to do all of your training in the absence of the game that you eventually want to hunt and target with that dog. However, we do have plenty of people that have followed the deer dog training blueprint on a deer farm, for example. So there's just deer all around them. And quite a few too that are in the same situation as the person asking this question here, where he's saying, I have the very occasional deer travel through his property. I'm pretty sure actually this person jumped in later on in this Q&A and just said, hey, I've actually probably jumped the gun. Well, it's been a while since I've done a Q&A too, so people have sort of been referring to the old Q&As and talking amongst themselves in a circle, working a lot of this stuff out on their own. And a lot of the stuff I talk about in these Q&As are just to sort of build a decent podcast that anyone can learn from. We've had a lot of people in that sort of situation too, where there is the odd deer hanging around, walking through the training paddocks at night and things like that. And so the best case scenario is to do all of your training where there is no scented deer. It just makes things easier, and more straightforward, and things can be a little bit faster and more effective later on, and there's less chance of confusion, so on and so forth. However, if you are in that situation, again, it's like the kangaroos. You don't want to be like training in a paddock with 20 deer in it. You don't want to be constantly training in a block of bush where you're spooking deer most times. It's things like that. But training in a paddock where 1 or 2 deer walk through at night, 1 or 2 a week or something like that, there's the odd deer mark around, a bit of scent. It's not a huge deal. It really isn't. It's not a huge deal. And you should be, it's the same as like someone that lives on a deer farm where they're sort of walking down a track every day and there's 50 deer in the paddock there. If you do all of your training, you know, in that environment, then you do your skin work with deer skin, and then you go out in the field and start following up on deer properly. Even if your dog doesn't track or wind really hard for the first couple of hunts, start shooting a couple of deer, just trust in the process, hunt properly. Eventually you'll shoot a deer anyway, that the dog hasn't done a huge massive indication and lead in on the wind. Just shoot one or two. The dog will start to click on what you're there for, and you'll be away anyway. So again, that's what I mean about it's not the end of the world. The best case scenario is that there's no scent of deer. Then when you do your scent training and take your dog into the bush, into an area where there is deer, and the dog's smelling that deer for the first time when you've done your scent training with deer skin, and hopefully it's just a well-selected dog that's naturally going to hunt anyway. The first time it smells that deer, it's new, it's interesting, it shows interest, you follow it up, do everything, do your part perfectly, back the dog up, show the dog that you're showing interest and it's showing interest in the deer, and it'll be away. And then hopefully it takes you to the deer. You shoot. Things can move a lot faster and more effectively, and you can get a better dog faster that way. But by no means is it to say you're wasting your time if there's deer scent around or something like that, because you're just not. You know, and a couple of examples of that is that I've spoken about in Q&As before, is I've literally known professional goat hunters that have pet goats at home. And they actually use them to get their young dogs bailing up on them and showing interest and stuff like that. And the dogs, situational awareness, that's one of our principles. Dogs have great situational awareness. It can work both for us and against us. But the dogs can pick up really quick that the deer that hang around, walk through our paddock at night, they're there, but we don't hunt them. But when we get in the car and go somewhere else and we turn up at these different hunting areas, and the hunt, this comes up later on this Q&A somewhere too, everything's totally different in the hunt, you know, and when you're actually going hunting and you've got all your gear on, your day bag on, or your pack on, and your belt, and your hunting clothes, and your rifle, and you're walking, you know, you're actually hunting, everything's totally different. And dogs are generally pretty good at picking up on that sort of stuff. When scent training, is it important to use skins of different species of deer? I will mainly hunt fallow and sambar. Fallow skin is far easier to obtain. However, I would rely on the dog more for sambar given their habitat and habits. That makes sense. Again, it's not. It's one of those things. The ideal situation would be if you can do scent work with both types of skin. Having said that too, though, not a huge deal at all. It's funny. Different dogs have different preferences to different things, to different animals. It really is interesting. I have seen dogs that naturally show a very keen interest towards deer. And then their first pig, the first time they smell pig, they're a bit standoffish and all weird and funny. This is dogs that have had no scent work with anything. I've had it the other way around. Print, for example, I did all my scent work with deer, and he hunted deer very well right off the bat. I had him in the perfect situation where there was no deer scent, where we did all of our training and where I raised them. I did my scent work with the skin off red deer, and I started hunting red deer first with him, and he hunt like straight off his very first time in the bush, his very first time winding a deer in the distance or tracking ground scent. He basically hunted on his first ground scent really, really well the first time he ever hit the ground scent of a deer. Just hunting off natural ability and training. I never did any scent work with pig skin. I actually avoided shooting pigs for a while because I was sort of demonstrating how and talking about how to keep it target specific to just deer. The very first pig Print ever smelt in the bush, he was very, very keen on, like really keen, really keen. That's with no training. That's just a dog smelling an animal in the bush and it wants to go for it. If I had have ignored that pig and not shot it and just pulled him off it, like moved in until I worked out what it was, and in that case that was quite plain to see. We started moving in and it was actually a bunch of small pigs feeding on berries with a hard nut inside, and there was all sorts of grunting and squealing and crunching and stuff. I would have just turned him away there. Having said that, here we go, going down a massive rabbit hole and side tangent. Having said that, I've spoken about this in Q&As before too. You want to be very careful when doing that there's not a deer behind the pigs. And I've had that too. I've made silly mistakes in the past with dogs doing a massive big long track for ages, and then they're creeping up over a rise and they're all locked up. And I see a blackbird like 2 meters off my dog's nose, and I growl the dog because I think it's pointing the blackbird when there's actually a goat like 5 meters past the blackbird back in the day when I was hunting goats over indicating dogs. So you got to watch out for that. And I've seen that a lot. Where goats are hugging deer, figuratively speaking, and pigs are with deer too. I've seen that a lot. Like you hunting all day, don't see a pig or a deer, and then the dog's taking me in, and I particularly see this hunting with subsonics, and I shoot a pig, gut it, take a couple of photos, have something to eat, muck around for half an hour, pack it all up. And quite often the dog will be trying to indicate and wanting to go from where I've shot the pig, and it's trying to take me to a deer that's 100 meters down the gut. That's still there because I was using subsonics. And I've had that the other way around too, where I've shot a deer, you spend that time sorting it out, and all of a sudden there's pigs right there. And I've had it with goats as well. Dogs taking me up the side to a goat. I think I'm looking for deer. Dogs taking me up the side. I've seen a couple of goats. Oh, bugger. Either shot, like I've had it where I've shot a goat that the dog's just taken me to. And there's been a huge big crashing out of the bush like 50 meters away. And you go over there and there's big fresh deer beds and big running marks from deer. So you've got to watch out for that. When doing this target specific stuff and pulling the dog off animals, or even worse, actually giving them a command of disapproval, pulling them off animals, because you think, it's taking me to a goat, but there's actually a big old stag laying 20 meters past the goat. You got to be careful for all that sort of stuff. But back to the scent training with different skins. Again, if you're hunting sambar and fallow, ideally you would do scent training with both, but it's not a big deal if you don't either. And the dog should hunt the different species very, very well, actually, straight off the bat. To be honest, I've never seen a dog not switch straight over to a different species like it doesn't even, like it's the same species. Print, for example, I did all of my training with red deer skin. As far as I can remember anyway, I may have mixed it up with something else. Actually, let me think about this. Print's first deer was Seeker. They were, and then I went back to reds. When we went hunting Roosa, I've shot Roosa, bush stalking, indicating with Print in the bush. He hunted them just like they were anything else. Where you hunted the pigs just like they were anything else. Generally, if you've got good raw material in the dog, you've got a good working dog, and you do all your training well, they're generally pretty keen to go. And it's often more about guiding them around stuff that you don't want than getting them to go for stuff that you do want. Next question. Hey, Paul, got an 11-month-old GSP heading dog that is coming along nicely on the blueprint. Not long till the first hunt, so pretty excited times, planning trips and hunts. The question is related to accessing Sika country through Poronui Station. As you cross through Poronui, there is obviously a lot of deer activity. All these first questions are all along the same lines, aren't they? And you're not allowed to leave the access track to follow up on any indicating that the dog will be doing. How would you manage this with your dog? Keep giving calm praise every time she's indicating, or avoid the area altogether? My note on this is situational awareness. Just march through Poronui not hunting. When you get to the public land and start hunting, everything will be very different. So just to fill in the gaps here for people that don't know what Poronui Station is it's a big station here in the North Island of New Zealand. It's actually a hunting safari park full of deer, loads of deer, and there's a public access walkway right through the middle of this thing, heading into public land where you can hunt Sika. It's actually an area, I've done that walk several times, hunted in there, and I've seen plenty of deer on the way in. You just walk along on this track. Sometimes there's no fences, and there's just deer running away right there in front of you. Again, it's not the perfect case scenario. It would be ideal if you could go somewhere, like to really totally start your dog off, its very first hunt. It would be ideal if you could go somewhere else, and there's plenty of different areas. Like once you're about to walk in through Poronui, there's plenty of areas close to there where you could jump straight into public land without having to walk in through Poronui, and just do a couple of trips like that, shoot a couple of deer. Make sure your dog's cranking, which generally doesn't take much. They should crank straight off the bat. And some people argue this, but all of the dogs I've had that I've raised and trained properly have indicated their very first deer very, very well. Winding, taking me in on the wind, tracking very, very well, unless I've done something to screw them up, which I have done that. I did that with Fly, for example, with the blackbird incident. And different things, but as long as everything's right, they should crank pretty good off the bat. And particularly, you shoot 1 or 2 deer over them without screwing anything up, and they should be cranking real hard. And of course, they always get better and better, basically forever, as provided you do everything correctly. But ideally, again, you would do that. Go somewhere else where you can jump straight into public land and start hunting straight off the bat. So the first deer you spook, you can track it with your dog. The first time your dog puts its nose down and start tracking, you can follow it up until you see a deer mark or work out what's going on, and then keep following it up. The first time your dog wins, starts winding, showing interest into the wind, you can follow that up. That's ideal. And then just get a couple under your belt and then start going in through Poronui. Having said all that, though, it shouldn't be a huge issue. And also, like, for example, if you've got some epic areas in the public land, so you walk in through Poronui and you've got spots that you go to regularly in there, the area, that's a really good place to go for you to set up your dog, shoot some deer. You're confident in there. You might just like the area, and that's where you want to, it might be a sentimental thing, and I get that. You want to take your dog into your favourite spot that you walk in there and go and shoot its first deer in there. It shouldn't be a big deal, man. It shouldn't be a big deal. And if you've got a good spot like that and you feel good about that you want to go to start your dog off, that's what you should do. And exactly, what I've said, just march through Poronui, not hunting. You're not looking out the side. Don't pay any attention. If the dog shows interest, you could, I wouldn't make a big deal out of it and stop and look and, tell your dog, good dog, and be trying to sort of somehow train it on the deer that you're seeing off the track in Poronui. Obviously, it's private land off that track. Those are privately owned deer. You can't shoot at them. You can't go off the track. You can't do anything there. All you're allowed to do is walk through. I would tend to more be trying to pass on the idea to the dog, just my body language, and that we're not hunting there. We're not interested in those deer. And then as soon as I get into the bush, that would change. That would change. And again, dogs are very good at picking up on that. And like, well, I'm trying to think which deer these were with Print, but pretty early on in Print's hunting career and quite a few of the some of the seeker that I shoot with Print in the hunting parts of the blueprint were on that trip. That exact thing, walking in through Poronui and then hunting on the public land in the Kaimana was there, in there. And we just walk through, and if we see a deer, dogs just don't make a fuss out of it. Just walk past, and then when you get in the bush and the dog starts showing interest, you follow it up, and just start shooting deer. The dog will learn quickly. Going back even further, I took Tessa through there a few times, and again, I've seen deer most times I've walked either in or out of there. Hell of a bloody boring trudge, by the way, along the gravel road and tracks in there. It's what is it? It's a good, I can't remember offhand. It's a good couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours of just flat rolling. A lot of it's gravel roads and stuff, just crunch. Carried some pretty good loads of meat out of there too. But yeah, I just wouldn't, again, it would be ideal if you could start your dog off away from that, but it shouldn't be a big issue at all. Another really interesting sort of dog-related thing in there one time is, this was with Tessa years ago, and walking in through there, and we just got onto public land, literally just climbed over the fence there and walking along that little bit of sidle track before you get down across the river and go over to the Oamaru hut. And I saw Tessa. It was pretty subtle, and I think my mate was in front just marching, and I saw, and Tessa's all excited, just wanting to keep up with the boys and that, and this is an interesting sort of bit of a tip thing too, on reading your dog and how you can push your dog past stuff. And I knew exactly what Tessa was like. Loved people, loved keeping up with the crew and that, and you had to watch her, as you do with every dog, watch her and operate her in a certain way, and we're walking on the track, and I just saw her nose go down and like her head turned to the side, and she looked up the hill and then kept walking, and sort of she did like not even a quarter turn, like an eighth of a turn of her head twice, like she was thinking about wanting to go that way. With Tessa, she was a trapping dog, talking about all this stuff. She was a dog that I used trapping in the Uaweras for years too, so walking past a lot of deer all day, basically working in areas with lots of deer, and then and hunting in there a lot too. And she learnt when we were trapping, she would still indicate them. And that's where I developed and learned a lot of that stuff about praising the dog on the indication, and then pulling them off and then keep going. And if you do that correctly, the dog will actually keep indicating the animals even though you're not shooting them. Also learned a lot about like, pulling the dog off animals like that. A lot of this sort of stuff anyway. There's a dog growling right behind me. Miko's laying on top of Miko does this. That was Print growling at Miko. Print's trying to just chill out behind my chair here. and Miko will walk right in, like where Prince curled up. She'll get her feet like right by his belly and then lay down on him, sort of pushing him back, and she'll slide down off him, and then she's laying there on top of him, and it pisses Prince off, and he'll sort of growl at her a little bit as she does it, and then he'll just leave her there. You're such a dog, hey? I'm waffling anyway on this stuff, but a lot of you guys say that the waffles are the best part. But yeah, Tessa got really good at knowing when we were trapping. Then if I got back from trapping and I wanted to go and shoot some venison that night, I'd often just do like quick evening hunts after the day's trapping. When I, as the line wound down and you got more and more time off the end, I'd do that. And you get home, unpack all your trapping gear. I had a belt with a hammer on it and all of that sort of stuff, and I often didn't take a rifle with me trapping. And then the gear would change a little bit, and I'd pick up the rifle and we go hunting. And we're not on the trap line. We're going somewhere completely different. I'm sneaking. I'm putting her in front. I'm watching her more. And she just, within not much time, she knew very quickly when we were doing what. She got very good at knowing when, if I'd shot a deer, and generally with Miko, I was just meat hunting and I just wanted to get meat so I could keep trapping. Sorry, with Tessa, I just wanted to get meat so I could keep trapping. So I'd just be shooting one. And once we'd shot a deer or a pig or a deer, and I got the meat packed up and all my body language changes, I'm just, and I actually had a command for it, but I'm just marching back to camp, and she'd realise, get outside. Where you go? Outside. Miko's sitting here just staring at me, creeping on me, like nudging my arm and stuff. She's out, so she's out of the room now. Yeah, Tessa would know when we headed back to camp, and she'd actually guide you back to camp really well. She knew the way back. If we'd walked up a shitty creek, she'd walk the exact track back down, or even down off the ridge. Even if you'd gone up a face, she'd take the same track back. She was very, very good at that. Really good. Prince not, because he's more focused on hunting. He's always trying to just keep hunting. But he's a different dog. I didn't do all that trapping work with him, and he's had a different upbringing and different experience. And I've often shot more than one animal in a day with Prince too. And even after we shoot an animal, he's just still keen to go. But back to this question. Oh, man, I'm all over the place here, eh? With Tessa walking in through Poronui, because he weren't really hunting, we were just marching into the hut. But I just saw it, and I knew exactly what it was. I knew a deer had crossed over there, and the second I saw it, her head dropped right down. She did sort of a quarter turn, looked up this is all without breaking stride. And where me and my mate are marching out, probably doing 4 or 5 Ks an hour, full pace walk. And so, little Tessa was a smaller lab, so she's got a good little trot on walking between us, and she just did that. And I called her back. I said to my mate, hang on. Called Tessa back, pointed where she had put her nose down and turned off, and gave her a double peep, just out of interest. Anytime I see something and I'm thinking, man, I bet you a deer crossed over there, and I wanted to see what she was going to do, see if there was a mark, whatever. She come back, pointed right where she'd put her nose down, gave her the double peep. Or Tessa was actually offered just, where you go. Put her nose down, started tracking up the side, real solid, real keen, followed her up a little bit. Only 10 or 20 metres, next thing I see a spot of blood. Remember, we're only just got in the bush. We haven't fired a shot yet. Then another spot of blood and more blood. And then straight away I see, because me and my mate had actually heard a shot only about 15 minutes earlier. Just we were actually still up on Poronui, just coming in that last bit of the public track there. And we heard a shot that sounded like it come from the Oamaru private side, which is just on the other side of the river there. And so someone's shooting at a deer on the Oamaru private block, again, which is on the other side of the river. And there's some big high banks in there, and you can quite often take long range shots at deer over that side. And someone had freaking clipped a deer on the other side of the river on the private block, and it had come down, crossed the river, climbed up the bank, and walked across the track in front of us, gone up into the public land. And Tessa had indicated it as we walked through the track, like 15 minutes later. And so we actually dumped the pack and tracked that deer for a good hour or so, and we tracked it right up into heaps of other fresh sign and stuff. And then we actually eventually got to a spot where it had stopped for quite some time, and because there was quite an area there where it either laid down or stood still, and because we're just seeing the odd drip of blood. But then we're finding that we got to an area where there was a classic bedding area for deer up on a bit of a knob, and there was actually fresh deer beds around and other deer marks. So that is probably where that wounded deer had actually run into other deer. And you could see where it stayed still, and there was like a decent patch of these drips of blood. But again, it was only drips. And as we kept tracking it, the drips and the patches got smaller and smaller, and it kept going. I think we actually ended up mucking around tracking this deer for about 2 hours, and it was just turning into a wild goose chase. With two of us and the dog and a wounded bloody deer that was probably wounded very lightly. So we gave up, but but so there's all of these things, and like talking about scent and we just walked in through Poronui, probably spooking deer all the frickin' way, and Tessa knew when we were hunting and when we weren't, and you need to keep a good eye on your dog too and read it. And that's why good training and having your stop, go, come, turn, walk in front, and everything set up nice and tidy with good crisp commands that you can actually give the dog a turn command or call them back to you. And you've done your scent work, you've done your skin work, you've done your scent work with winding and tracking. So you've got all your tools in the kit, and you know how to read your dog, and your dog knows you are reading it, and you've got confidence in each other, and you can communicate with each other. And again, you've done the work with the dog, so you can read it, and you understand scent and scent rafts and winding and tracking and everything, and you run your dog properly. You can navigate your way through all sorts of crazy stuff, like deer being in the situation, deer being in the training area, or walking in through Poronui and picking up on a subtle indication when your dog's stuck in between you and your mate, just marching into the hut, things like that. And so when you have all the tools and you know what you're doing, you can navigate a lot of that stuff really, really well. If you don't have all the tools and you don't know what you're doing, those are the exact sort of things that can just throw a massive spanner in the works. And that's where you wind up in a place where it's just taking you just never get there with the dog. Or it takes you years and years of hunting for your dog to begin to get good, because you're spending all of that time constantly trying to undo the damage from the mistakes that you're constantly making, like pushing your dog past the deer, like that deer that I on the way into Poronui, where I called Tessa back and put her on it. All of a sudden she's tracking it. How easy is that to be not paying attention or looking out to the side, or see it happen and not know what it was and just push your dog past it, and now it's going to be easier to push the dog past the next time. You do that half a dozen times, and your dog won't even. Your dog's gets to be where like Print is at with rabbits, where he's not even paying attention to it. Well, that's how people get a dog that won't track deer, a dog that'll work well off the wind but won't track. Other people end up with a dog that will track very well but doesn't win that well. It's because they've missed it. They haven't read the dog properly, and they've pushed it past, or they haven't pulled it back and put it back on at those key moments. So yeah, that's just a big sort of rant and ramble and all that sort of stuff. I'm just going to check the camera real quick because my my external monitors, I wrecked it. No, we're good. Yeah, I hooked the cable with my foot and just ripped the whole thing off the. It was pretty cool. Ripped it off the table and wrecked my the monitor's sweet. I just ruined the cable. So Christian has commented here. I think Christian asked some of the questions that are above. I sort of got a bit mixed up with the notes and some other things here, but Christian says, so those first, I think the first 3 questions were from Christian. And I knew he'd posted this, but I just wanted to, there's a lot of good stuff in that anyway, you know. I like hooking into a lot of the stuff in these Q&As regardless. One moment, sorry. Just double checking a couple of things on the recording. But Christian's just said, thanks for reposting my questions. Listen to a heap of Q&As now. I think I've answered the first 2 for myself. First month of training I will do around home. I've managed to find a suitable paddock with no deer and barely any kangaroos, and will use that from lesson 2 onwards. Still unsure with the skins. Plenty of time though. Just picked up my 8-week-old Bizzler pup on the weekend. Can't recommend the Q&As more highly. Awesome. So that's bloody good. And even though Christian was already off to the races anyway and sort of had a good plan and was charging, now I've covered it in depth a lot for him. He can go back over that stuff if he wants to and just sort of reaffirm a bunch of stuff. And again, this is why I go into it, stuff like this, regardless, and why a lot of people find these Q&As so useful is because a lot of people that are getting a pup, starting with the blueprint, and you've got all these questions and different things that are happening along the way, that you can go back through all the Q&As, you know. So there's a couple of comments about people that are really ripping into the Q&As, and they're helping a lot. Richard, hey there. I'd like to get a wee bit of advice on lifestyle and kenneling of deer dogs in the early months. Firstly, I leave the house 7:30 and return at 5:30. I intend to fit 3 sessions in each weekday and pack the weekends with training. Does anyone have any good ideas around balancing dog training and work? Yeah, that's a lot of sessions a day, man. Just make sure you don't overtrain. Having said that, though, if you can keep it light and keep it with the right tone, and that the training sessions are just a relaxed walk where you're not doing anything wrong and you're just folding those the right amount of drills in there nicely, that's epic. 3 sessions a day is awesome, as long as all the tone and the frequency of drills and everything's just right. That's awesome. But yeah, just don't overcook it and be too tight with it. So I leave the house at 7:30 a.m, return at 5:30 p.m. I intend to fit 3 sessions in a weekday and pack the weekends with training. Does anyone have any good ideas around balancing dog training and work? Secondly, I have a 5x5 area fenced off with an open kennel to leave the dog in during the day, but is it better to keep them in a caged kennel all day? Is it cruel to leave them in the kennel, and are they likely to develop any adverse habits in the absence of the trainer if left outside? Any advice welcome. My notes on this, I'll just smack them out real quick. You can do 10 hours in the kennel, but that 5x5 fenced area is awesome, and the fact that you're doing plenty of training, that's perfect. It's a great routine and setup, and it is. You know, I say you can do 10 hours in the kennel, you can do it. What I think is 8 hours. I think 8 hours in the kennel is fine. You know, who works an 8 hour workday these days? Barely anyone. But if you're a couple or a family, and one person leaves really early and the other person leaves later, so there's a bit of a overlap there, and you know, one person leaves at 9 but the other person gets back at 4 or something like that, 7 or 8 hours in the kennel's nothing. You know, dogs will sleep 17 hours a day, up to 17 hours a day. If the other, how's my math here? If the other 4 or 5, if the other 7 hours of the day have enough activity and engagement, dogs will happily sleep 17 hours a day. So 7 or 8 hours in a kennel is absolutely nothing. And that's the thing is that 7 or 8 hour mark, provided their routine in the morning is correct as far as when they get their food, and if they get a decent run with the right amount of time to have a proper toilet break in the morning, 7 or 8 hours in the kennel, as a dog gets a little bit of age, pups are different, but they go to the bathroom more regularly. But as a dog gets a bit of age on it, they'll go 7 or 8 hours without a toilet break quite easily, and as long as everything's right. They've had a good toilet break before they go in. But most dogs much over that, I find anyway. Once I get up around 10 hours at a stretch, most dogs will get used to that. Once I get much over 8 or 10 hours, I'll find the dogs have to start going in the kennel and run, which isn't a huge deal either. And that's why you have a kennel and run, and that's why they exist. You know, that's why it's a kennel and run. There's somewhere for the dog to eat, drink, sleep, and go to the bathroom. Basically, go to the toilet. Basically, everything a dog needs to do, it can do, and then it's still got its clean area to sleep, and all of that. Having said that, though, like I prefer not to. The routine I tend to try and run with my dogs, they basically don't go in the kennel and run. Every now and again, I muck up the timing of the routine, or, you know, the dogs may have been inside and they don't get enough time outside of a toilet break, and they basically go from inside, they get a short break outside. I've mucked up my timing of something, or I need to get somewhere early, and they'll go straight in the kennel. I don't get back soon enough, and one of them might take a dump in the kennel in the run. You know, I like to try and avoid that. So the dog's routine is they basically don't go in the kennel and run. And if you do everything perfectly, you can do that in an 8 to 10 hours at a stretch. If I was consistently going to be away for more than 8 hours, going from a kennel and run to what Richard's talking about here, a 5x5 fenced area, where it's a fenced area where the dog can actually walk around a little bit. It can go to the bathroom in the corner over there. It can lay in the sun in the corner over here. It can lay in the shade over that side. And if it rains or gets a bit windy or whatever, it can go inside a nice box, a kennel, inside that 5x5 setup. That's perfect, man. You're like that. What you're talking about there, you're leaving at 7:30. You're getting back at 5:30. So what's that? 9 to 5 is 8 hours. So it's about that 10 hours. which again is pretty standard. Who with the commute and stuff, who actually has an 8-hour workday these days? Barely anyone. So talking about being able to fit in 3 sessions a day, do a lot on the weekends. You know, you can do all your bigger stuff on the weekend, your skin work, introduction to gunfire, water, some of that stuff. You're actually going to have to travel around a bit and takes a bit longer. If you're doing 2 or 3 sessions a day during the week, your dog's having a pretty busy weekend, and you've got a 5x5 fenced off area in during those weekdays, man. That's an awesome setup. That's a happy dog and a really good setup. As far as the question, is it cruel to leave them in the kennel? It's not. No, it really isn't, man. And honestly, even like I say, I like to keep it so the dog doesn't, in a kennel and run, the dog doesn't go to the toilet in a kennel and run, and you can do that within an 8 or 10 hour block. However, man, if I was in a situation where I had a job that I was away from the house for 10 or 11 hours every single day, this is what I'm saying here. I think in a kennel and run for 10, 11 hours a day, I think that's a bit of a push for me. You can do it, people do it, and you can do it 100%. And to be honest, provided you do everything right for the dog, I really don't think they care, man. I really don't. As long as everything outside of that time is right, the dog doesn't care. They really don't. And there's a lot of dogs that live that lifestyle, and they're happy as really good, hard-working dogs that have a good job, good lifestyle, everything, and they're happy as, and they wouldn't want to trade it for the world. Having said that, though, I think if 8 hours in the kennel and run, 7 or 8, absolute piece of cake. If you're more like 10 to 12 hours away from the house, that 5x5 fenced off area is awesome. And most people can probably do that. Digging is a little bit of a hurdle there with fencing an area to keep a dog in. If you can put down a 5x5 meter slab, concrete slab, even a 3x3 or 4x4 meter concrete slab, and put a fence around that, or you've already got a concreted area that you can put a good sort of 6 or 8 foot fence around it and put a dog kennel in it, and there's a bit of shade in there, there's a bit of a sunny area, plenty of water, and a nice kennel to get out of the wind and rain. That's frickin' the Ritz. You know, that's gold. And a dog's good as gold in that for 12 hours, 5 days a week, provided you're doing enough with it outside of those times and everything's done correctly. And a dog can be happy as like that. And in a lot of ways, a dog that gets the right amount of training and interaction and mental challenge and bond and relationship and everything outside of that, they're actually more happy to have a spot like that acts like a den to just go and chill out, and they know that's their spot. They know what their routine's going to be. They know when you're coming home and what they're going to be doing. They're happy as, and the dog like that is actually happier like that than a dog that doesn't have structured training, that doesn't have a proper kennel and run, that doesn't have a job, that doesn't have an owner that's providing all of those things and proper leadership. You know, it's someone that's trying to be quote unquote nice to their dog. Oh, I don't want to put him in a kennel. I don't want to train him. I don't want to put a lead on him. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Most of those dogs end up absolute messes and are miserable freaking things. You know, and a dog that spends 8 or 10 hours in a kennel but everything else is bang on, way better off. Way better off. So I actually think, is it cruel to have them in the kennel? I actually think it can be. If everything outside of that isn't done correctly and the dog doesn't have the right engagement and it doesn't have the right direction and training and motivation and a job and something that they're working towards, that's what all this training and hunting and everything is, eh? Obviously, it can be if you just leave a dog in a kennel and do nothing with it. I think that's freaking totally miserable, you know. And I do see dogs like that, you know. You do see dogs like that. Whether it's a hunting dog that you know the person's not hunting it enough, or farm dogs. I've seen farm dogs like that where, you know, it might be a farmer hunt on or someone that I know, or somewhere you drive past something and the dogs are just always in the kennel just going, and they're barking and howling and going nuts. You're like, that dog's locked up too much and it's going nuts. You can definitely do that. Everything's always a balance, right, to get it right. But the question, is it cruel to leave them in a kennel? It can often be what's best for them, to have that structure and that downtime and that routine. Again, going back to that dog that just has no structure, and I think, like, talking about how you see that farm dog that's obviously has too much time in the kennel and they're barking and howling and stuff. I'll tell you what I do see a lot of too, and probably more, and what I think is just as bad, if not worse, is dogs that have, again, no structure, no leadership, no proper routine, and they're left out of the kennel, and it's that dog that's free in a fenced section, and that's barking at every car going past or running around in circles, and just that's a craziness in itself. You know, you see that, and so the question is it cruel to leave them in a kennel, and are they likely to develop any adverse habits in the absence of the trainer if left outside? Direct answer, it's not cruel to leave them in the kennel as long as everything's done correctly. And yes, they will definitely develop lots of adverse bad habits in the absence of a trainer if they're left outside. Definitely, to the point of like completely freaking destroying a whole section, and like I'm talking chewing your deck to pieces. You know, chewing wooden furniture to pieces, digging plants out, digging up holes, digging under the fence, barking at people going past. You name it, they'll do it. Like that whole just leaving the dog free in the section can get really squirrely, really bad. And the thing is, and why they can get so destructive and crazy, is that can actually be harder on a dog for the owner to leave, and to leave them free in this big section with everything going on. Their dogs can actually be very uncomfortable with that, and that's why they can get very destructive in that way, and start in a lot of barking and guarding and chewing and digging and exhibiting all of these negative behaviors. And on the flip side of that, if you raise and train a dog properly and they have a proper routine, and again, they know when you're coming back, they know what they're going to be doing, they have that proper engagement, they have a job to do, they have something to work towards, they proper mental stimulation, proper leadership from you, they know their place in the pack, they know they don't have to frickin' run the show, they're not getting left behind with all the responsibility, that's what you're doing when you leave a dog free in the section, all the shit's going on around it, and it's got all the space and freedom that it's like, holy shit, man, what am I meant to do? But if you set everything up properly with all of the positive things that I just listed there, and you set a dog up properly, proper introduction to kenneling, you show them that the kennel is the safe space to sit and relax, and you don't let any bad habits form. Dogs can be really freaking happy in a kennel, man, for up, like I say, up to, I reckon, about 8 or 10 hours a day. Maybe a touch more, give them that slightly bigger space, 12 hours a day, every day, happy as long as you do everything else right. And I think they're actually happier. And you'll like, and you'll look at them and they're just asleep, just chilling, just like sitting there watching the world go by. Happy as, man. And I think, you know, is it cruel to have them in the kennel? I think it can be cruel to not have them in the kennel. Are they going to learn bad habits with too much freedom with no one around? Definitely. And it can get crazy. Another thing from in my note here is as far as leaving the dog outside of a kennel or closure, it can definitely teach a lot of bad habits, and it can detract massively from hunting and training. That's a huge, and it's huge. Something I've been thinking about a lot lately, dealing with Miko, who has had a lot more freedom. She was created inside. She's had a lot more freedom, because I've got a really good dog-proof section in town here. So Miko's lifestyle has been a lot more time inside right from a pup, a lot more time free outside in the section, just trotting around and hunting, that, you know, keeping an eye in under the fence for the neighbour's cat the whole time and all of this sort of stuff. A lot of self-stimulation. And what's the frickin' word? I'm going to have a word block on this. This isn't the word, but self-satisfaction, where she's just mucking around, trotting around the section and inside, and like her sitting next to me before. Prince just chilling, laying down behind me, and she's sitting here all up in my grill, pacing around, lay down on Print, annoy him, he growls at her, so she stands up next to him, she's sitting next to me, looking at me, nudging my arm, all over the frickin' place, can't chill out. Because she's had that more freedom and less structure right from a pup, less direction, and it has massively detracted from her drive to hunt, because her brain's all over the place. She's not good at focusing on one thing. No discipline. And her priorities are all messed up. And she wants to pick and choose when she's done stuff, because she's done too much stuff on her own accord. And I think it's one of those things that I've spoken about this before in Q&As and in the blueprint, where we can sort of try to explain what's going on in the dog's head, but there's as far as the cause and effect of things, how the dog's really seeing it and reasoning and rationalizing it is well, that's a problem. The dog isn't really reasoning and rationalizing it and thinking things through. It's just things are just happening based on the way it's been raised and trained, and it's obviously the individual dog and its nature plays a massive role in that, but the way it's raised and trained and its daily routine growing up and all of that is constantly molding the dog, and it's one of those things, right? We can theorize and ramble on about why and what's happening, but one thing I can tell you 1,000% is that routine of Print being in the kennel more, raising him in the blueprint, he's such a focused frickin' dog. He doesn't care about bullshit. He doesn't get distracted. He's not all over the place. Very good at just chilling. But then when it's time to work, he works, man. And he's so frickin' focused, and he doesn't want to stop, and he doesn't stop, and he just keeps frickin' going. And he's just a joy to have around, and he's just unreal. Miko with her, I think it's part of it is her breed as well, but 1,000%, like this trouble, a lot of the trouble that I've had with her is a bird dog and her lack of focus, and she wants to choose when she does it. We had our stuff ups with the electric shocks and stuff, but it's gone well past that now, and even that aside, she's just a little bit all over the place and just wants to choose when she does it and gets distracted. Oh, no, I'll do this now, and no, I won't do that now. Little bit all over the place. And that kenneling, and I go over in the blueprint, and I think it's a huge part of what makes the blueprint system so effective, is that it really leans into that discipline and kenneling and management and structure early on to mold the dog. And once you've got it, you've got it. Now Print leads the same lifestyle as Miko does, but the foundation in that first 12 or 18 months of kenneling and structure just gives you a totally different product. Totally different mindset in the dog. It's freaking huge, that. Again, it's something I've been thinking about a lot, and yeah, I could go on and on about it, but like moving forward, when I do, I'm going to train some more bird dogs moving forward, and going back to that real training, kenneling, and structure, particularly early on, and just how much you get out of it. You know, that's the thing that people miss. Jocko Willink, he's been on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he has his own podcast and books and stuff, and look him up. He's ex-military from the States, and now he has these businesses basically coaching other people and other businesses on how to get stuff done and structure things right, and, you know, business mentorship and team leadership and things like that. And he is really well known as an incredibly good leader in the military, which is obviously something that's very difficult to do. And one of his really big sayings is that discipline equals freedom, which is quite counterintuitive, because discipline is usually, you know, you think it's knuckling down, and, you know, discipline and dog training might be putting the dog in the kennel, or leaving the lead on, or doing all your training for ages with the long line on, and not making any mistakes, and, you know, not letting the dog off the leash at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's all this freaking discipline. But that discipline early on now has Print in a point where I never have to growl them and tell them to get outside, or I never have to, very rarely have to have a bad word with them. And he's a very calm, relaxed dog, yet he's very confident and driven and focused in the things that he likes to do. He has an awesome job, awesome lifestyle. I take him out for runs all around Pepper Mile on the e-bike, off leash, through all the parks, up and down the beaches, all of that. I don't want to go hunting without him. Everyone likes him. You know, he has a great freaking lifestyle, and all of that comes from all of that discipline and structure early on. And so often you see it when people have serious issues with their dogs, that I've talked about this over and over and over. This is just one more way of explaining it. Discipline equals freedom. Now I'm in a situation with Miko where she's just not cutting it as a bird dog, no matter what I do now. And I know for a fact that a huge contributing factor to that is my lack of discipline with her earlier on in the raising and training of her. The way I raised and trained her, and the lack of there was a lot of discipline and structure, and that's why I have the foundation that I have with her set up to this point. But there's levels to everything, and it's two different things I'm talking about here. You can have that structure and discipline as far as Miko will be more likely to break than Print. but I can stop her. And she's not bad. She's got pretty good ears. But what I'm talking about is, so there's the discipline side of it as well that she's lacking in. But her mentality and her drive and her focus and her willpower from that lack of structure early on, it's just scrambled her a little bit, and she doesn't have the drive. She's wishy-washy. It's hard to put a finger on. It's hard to describe it properly, but I can see it, you know. And so going back to what I was saying just before was that I can see that lack of discipline and structure that I had early on with Miko has landed her in a point now where, now that I'm trying to turn her into a bird dog, it's difficult, and she's not as good at it, and she doesn't enjoy it as much. Which is okay, because I raised her and trained her as a pet. With Miko, I filmed the Pal Miko Dog Guide, which is my general dog training video series, which is a good series that people are using, and it works really well for training a pet. But it's just been really interesting how having that more relaxed approach early on, and then trying to go, okay, let's turn you into a hunting dog now, and how she's coming up short on so many things. And you know, I sort of took that for granted a little bit. Oh, surely I can be a little bit more chill with her. And I was almost testing the waters of that, of can I back off on some of that stuff and make some of the stuff, you know, some of my videos or the way I train dogs more user friendly, whatever. I was trying to lean into that idea a bit of, oh, let's just loosen up, make it a little bit nicer or something like that. And man, it had a massive effect. And it's one of those, it's hard to measure and it's hard to track it. And it's over such a large amount of time. You're talking 1 or 2 years, 3 years with Miko. So much training, so many other influences. So it's hard to track it, measure it, and say what has caused what. But that whole thing of like kenneling and routine, and just in my note here I've put, as far as leaving the dog outside of the kennel or enclosure, it can definitely teach a lot of bad habits and detract massively from hunting and training. And that whole thing of the dog being all over the place and like that self-satisfaction of chasing the cat over here, doing this all day, digging a hole, barking at the people out the front, creating all these little jobs for themselves that don't really have any real meaning to them. It's just getting distracted with all this bullshit that just scatters them all over the place, rather than creating that structure and channeling all of their focus and drive down one lane, you know, which is what we do in the blueprint, where the dog's kennelled, and it's the main thing that it looks forward to is training, and then we roll that over into hunting. So the main thing the dog looks forward to is hunting, and it makes a freaking massive difference, man. And if you ever, and with Miko, I've basically taken a dog that she's got everything she needs to be a good pet. She's, you know, she walks good on the leash. She's house trained. She's kennel trained, in and out of the truck, stop, go, come. But she's had more freedom, and she's been a bit more scattered and created all these silly little jobs for herself, and she's always mucking around doing something else. As I've tried to channel her into hunting, I've found she just hasn't got the character for it. Every now and again, she has a little crack at being okay and gets excited and does a few retrieves, and I'm like, mint, I'm away. But then later on, when something else changes, something gets a little bit challenging, she's just like, oh, no, I don't really want to do that. Because she's so used to being all over the place and making your own decisions and picking and choosing. And again, so I'm trying to explain it here, but I think there's a certain element of it that's actually difficult to explain because it's a psychology thing, and the way dogs work is different to us. It's a very complicated thing. But to boil it down, that whole thing of that discipline and structure is freaking huge towards how good your dog is going to be as a hunting dog, as a working dog later on. It's massive, man. It's huge, you know. Yeah, I'm thinking of other things to say. I could go on and on about it, but that's enough of a rant on that. I'll be talking about that later on, other things, but anyway. Christian, I feel like I really jumped after that mega rant. Which wasn't on Christian's question anyway. I feel like I really jumped the gun with my questions. I'm all caught up with the Q&As now, and I've found answers to all of my questions. That's why I like having all these big rants, because then it just puts a lot out there. Had my new pup almost 2 weeks and just focusing on bonding and linking those first couple of commands to actions. That's awesome. There is so much info in these podcasts. Again, thanks for all of the work that goes into making them available. They're an awesome resource. Can't wait for the next Q&A. Thanks, Christian, and thanks for signing up to the Dear Dog Blueprint, man. That's what allows me to put the time into everything else that we do here, including these Q&As. Rex, my 4-month-old GSP is working well on the long line. However, sometimes she will surge off with a stop, or she will surge off of a stop after she's released. So everything's going well. However, sometimes he's giving the stop command, goes through the steps in the proper stop drill. When he releases, the dog's taken off and hitting the end of the long line. Excuse me. She'll run full tilt until she reaches the end of the long line. I'm worried she's going to damage her neck. It's not all the time, usually towards the end of a 15 or 20 minute session. I'm going to read my notes on this. I've got quite a few notes because this is a hard one. And my notes sort of explain it, because I sort of sat there and I read the question 2 or 3 times and I thought about it. I didn't really know. I didn't have anything that comes straight to mind about, had that, know what that is, that I can explain. So here's my notes on it. I'll read that and we'll see where that takes us. That's strange. I've never had this issue before. I've seen pups and dogs do it a couple of times where they've never been on a long line, but usually once I've been training for a while, it's just never been an issue. So just that it's strange. I've never had it be a massive issue. Again, I've seen pups or dogs do it a couple of times when they haven't been on a long line much, like back in the day when I was doing, pups can do it their first couple of times, especially when you take them out into a bigger area. They might do it a couple of times, but they'll generally learn pretty quickly. But I'm talking within a couple of days, within 2 or 3 sessions, 4 or 5 sessions. So that's maybe one thing that's coming to mind already is, if you're saying that this is happening, 4-month-old GSP, which would be pretty much in line with the first time you're taking your pup or dog out into a bigger area. So maybe that's it. And maybe you're taking your pup out into a bigger area and it's hitting the end of the long line and you've done 2 sessions. You're like, oh no, my pup's doing this thing. You're always going to run into little things like that you have to work your way through. Then again, I've said they can do it a bit. Like maybe when the pup or dog's young, they're just not that smart and it takes them a while to pick things up, and they might just stop doing it and then they'll get a bit excited or distracted towards the end of a session and go running off and hit the end of it again. And that's where you really have to be watching the dog, reading and timing, constantly reacting to the dog, keeping an eye on things. And if it does go running off, just right as it's about to hit the end of the long line, take a couple of fast steps and give it a bit of slack so it doesn't hit it as hard, Say the pup's name. If the pup's Max and it's running off, give it a mild command of disapproval. Max. That should get the pup's attention to sort of slow it down and look back, and then you keep walking and it just keeps going. You got to handle the dog. I'm just sort of throwing ideas around here. This is another big one. This is from my notes again. Are you sure you're not missing something? Like something's off with your body language or the way you're doing something, or something's happening outside of these. Okay. Are you sure you're not missing something? Like something's off with your body language or the way you're doing something. Are you taking off too fast? Can you slow down? Pups and dogs are a reflection. They're a mirror. They're just reflecting often what we're doing. And often someone will be like, oh, my dog's walking too fast, or it's doing this or that. And in a one-on-one session, it's like, geez, mate, well, you're walking pretty fast. Could it be that? Towards the end of the session, are you starting to rush a bit and the pup's picking up on that and trying to take off? Again, I'm just throwing ideas around. Could there be something that's happening outside of these training sessions, like the pup or the dog getting too much freedom outside of training so they're not learning properly? My next note, to me, if this thing is happening a lot and it's ongoing and it's not getting better, something's wrong. I've never seen it be a big ongoing issue when everything is right. I've mucked around with a lot of dogs. I've never had this be a big ongoing issue. So that's just what I'm thinking here. I don't want to point the finger, but for me, something must be off somewhere. If this is either you're jumping the gun a bit and you're like, oh man, what's my dog doing? It's hitting the end of the long line, and you're making a mountain out of a molehill, or something's off. You either need to be a bit more patient and work through it, or something's off somewhere. Here's from my notes, going back to my notes. Another thing you said is it's usually towards the end of the session. Is the pup rushing to get back? Is the pup rushing to get back home? Is it anticipating something? Is it anticipating getting led off the long line when you end the session? Is it going to get a freedom session straight off the back of training when it should be going straight back into the kennel? There's a million possibilities, and this is what I mean. I've never had that. It's a bit of a difficult question to answer, so I'm just sort of throwing ideas out there. I hope something there makes sense, or let us know. Rex, let us know how you're getting on with that, and because it's been a while since I've done a Q&A, so some of these questions are quite old, and also on that note is there were 2 or 3 other people that said, yeah, I've got the same problem. So yeah, I'm interested in that. And I'm not saying I've never had it. I definitely know what you mean. With a young pup that it's in a new situation or something, and they're all excited or distracted, or I give too much of an enthusiastic go command and I walk off too fast, or something's off somewhere. You can get in a situation where the pup goes to run off. Mate, is your long line too short? Have you got enough slack in the long line? Are you gathering the long line up and holding it, or have you got a proper 7 meter long line and you're keeping that big belly of slack in it? Something's off somewhere, and man, that's a real common one. loads of people in one-on-one sessions like, man, I'm doing this change of direction and long line stuff properly, and my dog's just not getting it, and we do a one-on-one, and I'm like, and again, I've said this heaps in Q&As, I first thing I do is I don't do anything. I don't tell them to do anything. I say, just show me what you normally do with your dog. And they're frickin' got the long line all wound up in a bunch in their hand, and they've got like 3 meters out with tension on it the whole time. Or it's not even a long line. It's like they've shortened it up and they've got a handle in the end of it. And the way you use and manage that long line is incredibly important, or it just doesn't work. And there's 15 hours, not quite because we get off the long line at the end, but there's about 10 hours of me using a long line in the Deer Dog Training Blueprint. So when you've got the blueprint and then you come and do a one-on-one and you reckon it's not working and you're doing something totally freaking different to what I'm doing for the whole time in the blueprint, that's probably why. But yeah, I don't know. I'm ranting. I'm rambling. One moment. I'm just going to throw a bit of heat on here. She's cooling off. Yeah, I'm back. Joshua. Oh, I'm not back. Hang on. Sorry. One moment. Intermission. I'm back. Let's crank the temp up on this baby. Joshua. Hey, Paul, a few weeks till I pick up my pup, and I'm just watching the blueprint and learning what I can. Question is that I do not have anyone at home to leave the pup with while I'm at work, so I'll have to take it with me. I work in a marina servicing different boats, and there's lots of people and distraction. Was thinking I could maybe set up her cage in the workshop or van and have her kennelled in there. It's a small workshop with lots of coming and going and sometimes grinding and loud noises. There's also another dog at work, but she spends most of her time in the office, so shouldn't be too much of a distraction, I hope. Just after ideas on how best to balance this, and be great to hear from others who've done it before. Yeah, so a crate in your van and a toilet break every time you get a break sounds like a good option for the least distraction. So particularly early on, when you get your pup or dog on weekends, you know, in the Palmico Dog Guide, we go into more stuff on crating and crating inside and stuff like that. You can basically follow the principles and things that we do in the Deer Dog Training Blueprint in regards to kenneling, and just transfer that stuff straight over to crating. And, that first weekend we get Print home and we put him in the kennel and we let him cry it out, and then go back to him once he's quiet and relaxed. We don't go back to him when he's barking and whining. Basically teaching him that the kennel, the way to be in a kennel is just to chill out and relax. And that's the best way for us to come back and let you out. And that barking and whining in the kennel achieves nothing. If you work on a bit of that stuff with your pup in the crate in the back of your van, get the pup good in there. And if you're at work, when you're working, you legally have a break, every 3 or 4 hours. that should be all right to go out at smoko time and let your pup out, little toilet break, maybe 5 minutes on the long line, back in. Lunchtime, same thing. Afternoon smoko, same thing. Should be good as gold. I've got here as a note, the van could be an issue with heat and rain. Yeah, the main time I can see being an issue is when you really want to close the windows because it might rain, but then it's in that 4-hour block, it could also be too hot to have the windows closed, and you don't necessarily want rain coming in the windows of your van. That's why, like in my truck's a really good setup. I've got it's a ute with a canopy on the back of the ute, and I've got big sliding windows in the side of the canopy and a window at the front of the canopy in between the cab and the canopy. So that window can be wide open and the dog can't get out of there because there's only like a little 2-inch gap between the front of the canopy and the back of the ute cab. And then the big sliding windows on the side of my truck, I've got good strong steel mesh over that so the dogs can't climb out the window, so I can leave the side windows wide open too. And plenty of airflow, but the dogs can't jump out the window. It's also good for security with gear in the back of my truck and the dogs and things like that. I can lock the back of the canopy up. Good secure caging on the window so I can have the windows open. It's all secure, but there's good airflow for the dogs to keep them cool when it's hot. And because it's a ute, if it's one of those weird days where it's warm and sunny, but we could get the odd shower or two, I don't really mind if we get the odd shower or two with my canopy windows open because it's only the back of my ute. It's a ute, So that's the only issue I can see with the van is maybe not wanting to leave the van windows open, have it raining in your van. But I think in that situation, the van, outside in the van sounds like a really good option, particularly early on with a young pup. And then I think as time goes on, having a pup or a dog inside a busy workshop should be fine too. It's exactly like crating a pup or dog inside or outside for that matter when you've got a busy household, and a pup or dog just has to get used to being in a kennel or a crate with lots of stuff going on around them. And they will do that. However, too much stuff going on around them too early can be just making it far more difficult for them to learn how to relax in the crate. And, every bang and every person that walks past wakes them up and distracts them and gets them looking at you and thinking about getting out, and may cause them to start whining, may cause them to learn how to relax in the crate slower, basically setting the dog up to fail, putting it in a difficult situation, which is never good. But I think that workshop, the dog being in a crate in a workshop later on could be really good. It should be fine. And it may even be that sort of situation where the pup could be trying to whine in the van a little bit because people are walking past the outside out there too, but you're not there to correct the pup. Whereas when the pup's in the crate in the corner of the workshop and it starts fidgeting it around or starts chewing its blanket or starts whining, you can actually, give it a command of disapproval and a stomp of the foot to snap it out of it, And a pup or a dog, as long as it's not like, you're not talking about busy workshop where like sparks are bouncing off the crate and frickin' old mates, hammering steel with a sledgehammer right next to the crate, and it's like there's always levels to things, right? It's like with the kangaroo thing and the deer thing and basically everything, there's levels. And it always comes down to common sense and just that using your common sense and a bit of initiative. But having the crate inside the workshop could be good too, and you should be able to do that, most people that have been in lots of different situations and knowing a few dogs will know of a dog where my dog's a pretty hard case for it sometimes around home when I'm marching around and doing stuff and they're just asleep and I'm stepping over them and stuff like that. But or a dog, you know, an old workshop dog that there's all this stuff going on, and there's just some old lab like curled up in the corner that doesn't even care anymore because it's been in that environment so much. So yeah, that's my take on that, man. Either could be good. There's just a whole bunch of stuff to sort of think about it. The van might be good for starting the dog off in a quieter environment, but within reason, as long as the workshop's not too crazy, there should be no reason why you can't sort of crate a pup or a dog as they learn in the corner of a relatively busy environment. Will, what do you think about using a stick with the dog? Not to beat them or anything. Okay. It's a bit of a hard case, this question. I've got to have the odd laugh here. What do you think about using a stick with the dog, not to beat them or anything, but just as an extension of the arm, example, pushing their bum down to sit, etc.? I've heard people say you should never use sticks on your dogs for any reason. What are your thoughts? Cheers, Will. Here's my 100% honest notes. My initial thoughts are don't do it. No, don't do it. Talk about sheepdog trainers using sticks. I'll talk about that in a moment. No, hang on. Reading my notes further. We'll talk about this. So my initial thoughts are just no. 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 You know, it's actually, I'm pretty sure it's in the rules of the inner circle. Is we went through a bit of a phase at one point where I'd done 20 odd Q&As and 15 or 20, and I'd covered all of the really common questions a few times, and it was starting to get difficult for people to come up with a question, and people started asking all these crazy outlandish questions of all the stuff that had absolutely nothing to do with the blueprint. And I said it, and so we've got actually one of the rules in the inner circle was keep Q&A questions blueprint related, because if we open it up too much here, these just end up all over the place, and the answers get very messy and all over the place and confusing, and we start dragging in stuff that's irrelevant and that could lead people to draw conclusions that could end up having a negative impact on their training and stuff like that. And this is all about helping people with training. So we do have a few rules. And that's probably the main thing, is that, you know, it's not in the blueprint. You don't need to do it, and don't do it, you know. Sheepdog trainers use sticks a lot. Very, very common. However, they also use sticks with their sheep, and that's very, very common, and it has a very good, incredible, and practical use where, again, as you said, not to hit the sheep or anything, but when you're trying to get animals into yards and gates and drafting animals and things like that. I grew up on a farm. It's something I've done quite a lot of, and you might be in the yards trying to draft one, you know, what do you call it? You know, you can use a drafting gate where you're pushing animals down a race, and you've got a gate that splits the race either way, so you can draft one animal out with a proper drafting gate. There's another style of drafting, sort of a more free style of drafting, where you're actually just in a big yard or even a paddock sometimes. I grew up on a dairy farm where one of the worst jobs you could get was having to go and draft out calved cows in the paddock with my dad. Who, drafting out calved cows from the paddock isn't necessarily that bad, but doing it with my dad was. And you draft them out in the paddock, and the whole thing is you're trying to split one cow off a few cows, and you basically walk up to them and they try to step one way and you step the other, and sometimes it's just a matter of they try to go left when you want them to go right to split them off, and half a step forward and you reach your arm out, and it's just a range thing, and they just go nut, and it'll turn them off. And having a stick as an extension of the arm, it's just a proximity thing, can be really useful. So, and that's why sheepdog trainers and handlers use them a lot. And a lot of it's to do with actually working the sheep, not the dog. And, you know, turning the sheep into a gate and you're trying to cut off a race, or your dog's 5 meters out and the sheep are thinking about going between you and the dog, and your arm outstretched isn't enough to stop the sheep going through, but your arm in a 6 foot stick sticking out is enough to stop the sheep. So it's just an extension of your body. So talking about that and the fact that shepherds use sticks with sheep. If I was training a sheepdog and I was going to be using a stick with the sheep, I would want to have that stick with me while I'm training the dog. I definitely wouldn't want to train a dog in the absence of a stick, and then the first time I try to go out and do its actual job, I've got this 6 foot stick that I'm waving around everywhere. The dog's going to be like, what the hell? So I would make that stick, I would use that, I would at least have that stick in training. I want to be waving it around. Sometimes you're going to be wanting to wave that stick around. The dog might be 4 meters away and the sheep's trying to go between you and the dog. The dog might be 2 meters away and the sheep's trying to go between you and the dog, and you need to stick the stick out, almost touching the dog to try and cut the sheep off to get them in the yards. I believe, I can't remember, do they use sticks in sheepdog trials? I can't remember if they do or not. I believe they may do. So you definitely want your dog to be very comfortable with the stick. I'm guessing, but I would be almost positive that that's actually a huge part of the reason why people use sticks so much in sheepdog training, is because they're going to be using them anyway and they need the dog to be used to it. Having said that, I know as 100% fact too that a lot of sheepdog trainers do use the stick as a big part of their training as well, and quite a lot. And again, it's never to hit the dog. They'll use it when they're teaching sides to a dog. They'll often have a dog on a rope and get it going in circles, and they're using the stick to get the dog going in circles. I've seen a sheepdog trainer, he was trying to slow the dog down from going right, and the dog kept pushing right, and he just threw the stick in front of the dog about a meter in front of it. Just the dog kept trying to go that way, and he was trying to say don't go that way, and the dog wasn't listening, so he threw the stick and the dog just pulled up. All right, I won't go that way. So it does have, so there's lots to it, right? But long story short, most people aren't going to have a stick when they're hunting. You might have a walking stick. I actually do use a walking stick quite a bit now, the mountain stick. But generally I don't. And pretty much all of my bush stalking, I don't use a stick. You know, we do a fair bit of work with a rifle in training because we're going to be using that. But I just wouldn't, man. I really wouldn't. And excuse me, even if I was just doing it just because I wasn't going to have, I wouldn't want my dog to get used to me having the stick, and then when I don't have the stick, it's not the same, you know? If I wasn't going to have a stick the whole time, I don't want to use a stick. My final note, long story from me is it's a no from me. Long story short, it's a no from me. Don't do it. It's too complicated. We don't need it, and we aren't going to have one long term, so just no. Yeah. And it's I don't mind answering the odd question like that. And it brings up a lot of interesting stuff and whatever. It's all good, man. So I don't want to be like, these are the rules, don't ask these questions. I'd rather people ask the occasional question that's like, nah, it's a little bit on the edge. And I don't mind. I like talking about sheepdog training and whatever, you know. So if you've got the blueprint and you're in the inner circle, by all means ask away. If it's getting way off the track, I just won't answer it. It's fine. No question's a silly question, but just, you know, I'm rambling. But yeah, try to keep them a little bit on track. But you guys have been good, and it's fine. This one's a little bit on edge too, Mark. Hey Paul, looking to do stock dog herding trials here in the States while also doing the blueprint. Should I complete the blueprint with my pup first before introducing any herding commands? Would this type of activity be incompatible with deer stalking or go nicely hand in hand? Do you have any resources you would personally recommend for sheepdog livestock herding? For sheepdog livestock herding, that's the question. My notes on this are, this is definitely getting into that territory where we're getting way off of the blueprint. Going back to this work that I've been doing with Miko, even though it hasn't panned out and it hasn't worked out the way in the perfect case scenario, or Miko hasn't turned into like this mind-blowingly good bird dog. But maybe I think it is actually it has worked out into a good scenario because it's just been a way for me to do a big deep dive back into dog training, and I've just got immersed myself back into it, actually doing it, and I'm getting fired back up and having all these new ideas and learning and having more solid ways of talking about old ideas and coming up with new ideas. And this is a philosophy, really. It's a principle it's a philosophy, really. The idea that I've had of straight line dog training. Straight line dog training. So good dog training is actually a straight line, like the blueprint. You can actually draw a blueprint of the blueprint, or it's more of a flow chart. It's more of a flow chart if you think about it. And it's, you start with the pup, but it's the whole flow chart. If you think about the whole blueprint and doing it correctly, it's a straight line. It's not a flow chart of do this, and if this happens, go that way. If that happens, go the other way. Nah, it's do this in a way that basically any dog can do. Or let's say something like 99 out of 100 should be able to do it. It's not this we're not trying to do this crazy outlandish thing that's so freaking difficult for so many dogs that only a certain percentage, like 50% or 30%, can do it. We're choosing the right dogs here, we're in the ballpark of the sort of heading dog, cattle dog, Labrador, pointer, spaniel, and several others. And we're choosing a relatively well-bred example of these ballpark breeds. And we follow the blueprint and we do it properly. It's a straight line. You just start doing the first thing and you do it correctly until the dog's got that sorted. And then you start doing the next thing and you do it correctly until the dog's got that sorted. And then you start doing the next thing and you do it correctly until the dog's got that sorted. The flow chart is, it's not working yet. Okay, we'll work out how to do it better and keep doing it until the dog's doing it. And then you go to the next step. It's a straight line. And what happens when you deviate from that straight line is there's endless possibilities. So once you deviate right off it and the dog starts breaking and chasing, or because you've put it in a situation without a long line on it and it's broken and it's chased something, and then that's happened 2 or 3 times and a few other bad things have happened and you haven't really kennelled it and it's doing this or that, and then you screwed up something with gunfire training. It's sort of a little bit gun shy. And then like with Miko, she was Kiwi aversion trained when I was trying to get her to be a bird dog. And then she got a shock retrieving her first duck. But she's sort of been a pet, so trained as a pet. And then I've got this problem over here, another one over there, and another one over here. And I start trying to fix it. And then I'm coming back around and you don't know where, there's no beginning, start, or end. It just gets very freaking messy. And so that straight line, once you start veering off that, let's say you get a gun shy dog because you don't do your introduction to gunfire properly, and that would be a loop off the straight line. Hopefully you could just take a detour off that. You're trying to follow the straight line of the blueprint. Just do this, next step, next step, next step, next step, all in a straight line all the way to shooting deer. But let's say you didn't do your clapper work properly and you just pulled out the 308 and just let rip, and the dog just got a massive fright and got gun shy. So now you message me, hey Paul, I didn't do the clapper work properly, and now my dog's gun shy. And I've tried going back and doing the blueprint stuff, and I've done all my clapper work, and I've got back to the gun, and he's scared again, and I don't know what to do. Now we've got to take a loop off that straight line. We're doing something else that isn't in the system to try and fix the thing that you weren't doing in the system. It breaks the whole chain of everything, and everything gets all over the place. Because now later on, we might get the dog to be good with the gun and training, and because you haven't shot a deer with it yet and you've done all your scent work, that dog might start hunting correctly with good drive, but then when you shoot the dog's first deer over it, or it might happen on its 7th deer, it's out in front and you shoot it and it gets muzzle blasted a little bit. But because you made that mistake with the gunfire back here, now the dog starts getting a little bit sketchy about taking you to deer because it knows you're going to shoot it and it's got that past negative experience with the gun. There's another loop off the straight line. And that's just what I've noticed. One thing I've recognized, it's just an idea and a way of thinking about it. You can have this straight line of a system of dog training that can work for lots of different dogs, and as long as you don't make any mistakes and you just stay on that straight line, that one straight line can work over and over and over with thousands and thousands of dogs. Once you start veering off that line and making mistakes and skipping stuff out and adding other stuff in, you can draw endless loops off that line, and it's just never ending. You make one problem, it'll pop up somewhere else, and back, now what do I do? And I don't know, because it just gets very freaking messy and complicated. And there really is an infinite amount of ways that it can go wrong and pop up elsewhere, and different things that you can try and double back around, or it can just be a straight line. That's what it is. That's what good dog training is. And there's a lot of it based in science too, and chain theory, chaining. It's probably a whole other podcast. But just in as I've been hunting with Miko and then trying to train her and retrain her and fix stuff and that, I'm just like, I've broken the chain. Let's look at chaining real quick. Let's bring it up. Chain theory and psychology. I just want to try and give you guys a quick definition of it here. So people talk about chaining and dog training quite a lot, and for a long time I thought that chaining was the dog training thing, but chaining is actually a scientific psychological thing. So it's been brought into dog training from science and psychology of humans. I haven't got a chain theory. I've got a heap of things here. And when I first looked it up and started studying it more, I actually found, I think it might have just been Wikipedia on it. I found a really good page that just explained it quite quickly. This is why I just said we'll talk about this another time. Articles for chain psychology wiki. So, associative chain theory. The associative chain theory was an early behaviorist psychology of complex behavior, which claimed that each component of a behavior was linked associatively to the next and that the full sequence was chained together in one smooth performance. So that's it. Everything's linked together. And, associative definition of associative chain theory. This is what we're after. In learning theory, this is reading off the definition of associative chain theory off psychologydictionary.org. In learning theory, some types of behavioral psychology. In learning theory, some types of behavioral psychology, a theory of how complex behaviors, including some linguistic behaviors, are formed from varying combinations of simple stimulus response association. Associative chain theory. The associative chain theory explains how increasingly long behaviors can be chained together to produce complex series of actions. It's all pretty freaking all over the place, isn't it? But basically, chaining. This is why I shouldn't have got into this because I'm not ready to talk about it yet. But good dog training is all chaining. The whole blueprint is all chaining, linking one thing to another to another. The stop drill is chaining. We first begin the whole thing by linking the action to the command with a little pup. And then we go out, and as we're walking, we give our stop command, stand on the long line, step in and push the pup's bum down. And that's how it links the command and then to stopping and sitting and then staying, and then we slowly lengthen the amount of time that the pup will stay there. And then we slowly increase more distraction. It's all step by step. We start off with the very simple part of it, and we just stack onto it. Then we create stop to the shot. And we keep stacking on more and more and more until you get to the point where Print is at, where you can tell him to sit, he'll just sit. If a hare runs across in front of him, he'll stay. If you fire a shot, he'll sit down. It's all chaining. Everything's linked together. And that whole thing, that's this idea of straight line dog training and this idea of chaining in psychology. And you can develop that straight line of chaining, everything linked together. But once you break it and start taking these loops off the side, you break it and the dog gets all mixed up and things start coming in messy all over the place. It gets very, very freaking difficult. And coming right back to this, adding this hurting in there, or the stick, or I want to do this or I want to do that, it becomes very difficult to near on impossible to give a good, clear answer, because once we go away from the straight line, there's an infinite amount of things that can happen and pop up later. And like the blueprint system is very carefully put together and designed from start to finish, and it really has no big flaws in it. It's a straight line. It uses that science of chaining and linking everything together from start to finish with no breaks. And it really freaking does work. And once you go away from that, all bets are off. And that's why it's very difficult to add something in. I actually used to think you should do your deer dog stuff first and bird dog stuff after. But after having mucked around with Miko for the last few months, off the end of, being real deep in dog training for basically 10 years, well, a lifetime really, and really nutting it out and having things go wrong and hunting over and realizing different things and doing all. The best plan I can have at the moment is to actually do all the bird dog stuff and the deer dog stuff second. Not to say that's the only way. You could do it in two different ways. But what I'm saying is, with the straight line thing, I don't think people sometimes talk about dog training as, again, that flow chart is of try this, and if this result happens, do this, but if that happens, do that. And so it's like this big flow chart of, if you answered yes here, go this way. If you answered no here, go that way. And do all this other stuff and loop back around and join back on here. I think it's off, but you can do that, but man, it's very difficult. And because everything's so linked, and there's so much association going on, one problem way back here can crop up again way later on. And the whole system, to be really reliable, has to be designed so freaking well. It really does. To be really repeatable over and over. It can just get so squirrely, man. It really can. And once things get out of shape, or you've got well down the track with these issues, you can reach the point of no return. Like Miko's never going to be the bird dog she could have been. And it's quite a harsh reality, really. Not that it's a failure here, because again, Miko wasn't raised and trained as a bird dog. It was an afterthought. And I was probably a little bit cocky or naive as to how easy it was going to be to turn her into this machine bird dog. And the more I've worked on it, the more I've either realized or actually more accurately remembered how important all this stuff is. And that structure and discipline early on, and chaining and the straight line. It really is, man. And there's level, Miko's fetched birds out of the river, out of ponds, off the ground, off all over the place. But she's also failed in all of those areas too, and failed at some really key times when it should have actually been pretty easy. And it's easy to bullshit that too, eh? And it's been fun, interesting doing this bird dog thing. And I remember one guy, I saw something early on, it might have been on social media, something, dog's going bloody well this year. It's so easy to say that, my dog's going really well. But then I spoke to him later on, he was like, he went really well for a bit there, but then I started having a problem, and then he wouldn't do this and that, and then this other day he did this, and it's that Old saying, everything before but is bullshit. So my dog's going really good. He fits this and he fits that. Man, he's going around. And yesterday went really well, and today's gone today. But everything you just said leading up to that but doesn't really count because there's a but. It either is or it isn't. You know, and there's levels to everything, and it's so easy to dabble around the outsides and then the dog be okay. But to have a really freaking good dog, it's a huge difference, you know, and getting all this stuff right. And that's what the blueprint does. It really does. And anyway, massive rant. But going back to, I had a note here again, talk about straight line dog training. Which again is basically an idea and a philosophy I've sort of come up with, you know, while driving back from a hunt with Miko this season, and then I thought about it over and over and over again, and yeah, it's definitely a thing, man, big time. But going back to this, looking to do stock dog herding trials here in the States while also doing the blueprint. Should I complete the blueprint with my pup first before introducing any herding commands? Would this type of activity be incompatible with deer stalking or go nicely hand in hand? Do you have any resources you would personally recommend for sheepdog livestock herding? Like, and this is why I just had that massive rant, because after having that rant, how can I even begin to answer that? You know, it's really, really difficult without just trying to give some bullshit, wishy-washy answer that I think you might want to hear. It's really difficult, man. Should I complete the blueprint with my pup first before introducing any herding commands? It depends if your dog being a big game indicating dog is the priority, or the dog being a sheep dog is a priority. You're saying you want to do trials with the dog or sheepdog herding trails. I'm guessing it's trials. It's a lot, man. It's asking so much, eh? It really is, and see, there's so much nuance to this, and this is what I mean, where you just get completely out into the weeds, and I can talk a lot about it, but there's so many different sides to it, and it's so subjective, and I could go on and on for ages, like I know what I'm talking about here, and you could go off and do something on the herding side and be like, oh, you know, I put a collar on the dog and I did this. And I'm like, what? I didn't know you were going to do that. Because that is a huge loop off the side of the straight line with, I have no idea what down there. You know, I have no idea what effect it's going to have later on, or where you're going to, or I don't even know what you're doing. Would this type of activity be incompatible with deer stalking or go nicely hand in hand? It totally depends what you're doing. It totally depends on the dog. It totally depends what you expect. It depends on your execution. It depends on so much, man. It's so freaking hard. I can't say, okay, yep, done this before, know how that works. You should do all of the herding stuff first, then do the blueprint, and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. I can't say that. Literally no idea, man. My last note here is try to give the best answer I can anyway. if whatever your priority is, I would do first. If you want your dog to be a good big game indicating dog, and the stock herding stuff is the sheepdog livestock herding stuff is secondary, I would do all of the blueprint, get that dog hunting, get everything sorted, basically get it to the point where print is at the end of part 12 or even further down the road than that. So the dog, you've done the straight line of the blueprint and the dog's done quite a bit of hunting. Sorry about that, everyone. No idea what happened there. The gear just had a complete equipment failure. Just looked down and it said encountered an error, stopped recording. So had to use the sound off the camera, which is nowhere near as good as the podcast gear. But it's all there anyway. Crisis somewhat averted. Where are we here? Just opening my notes back up. Recent. So yeah, going back to the stock herding dog thing, if the deer dog side of it is your priority, I would do all of the blueprint first, start hunting over the dog, shoot a few deer over the dog. Where the hell is this thing? Here. Shoot a few deer over the dog and then do your sheepdog livestock herding stuff after that and see where you end up. If being a sheepdog livestock herding dog is a priority, I would do all of that first and then do the blueprint stuff after. But either way, it's going to be hard to have a dog that is excellent at both without an incredibly good plan. And because I don't know what you're intending, like I just can't do that. You know, I've spoken about it before too, and the reason why these Q&As work is, for starters, it's just I was talking about dog training for so long that if lots of people listen to this, they learn a lot of stuff and they can just apply that to their own training. But to make it super rock solid, if the only reason these Q&As work, the only reason they exist is because there's that foundation of the blueprint and people start working and start asking questions, you know, and I actually have a reference point of the blueprint to talk about and refer back to. Like, if I was just answering just these big, wide open questions, like I'd feel strange about it, because if there's no blueprint to refer back to, there's no straight line, I'm just sort of frickin' waffling. It just gets I don't like it. It just gets really messy. And a little bit pointless in a lot of ways too. You know, it's the foundation of the blueprint is what really pulls these together for me, and actually gives people something that they can really actually do and go and train their dog and have a very high chance that it'll work very, very well. And that's it, man. That's all I can say about that. But again, you know, it's one of those difficult questions that's getting a bit off track, but that also causes me to go on those big rants that are actually, I think, really constructive and really good. So they get a little bit weird and they get a little bit deep and all over the place, but you know, all of the real step-by-step demonstration stuff is in the blueprint. But that only goes so far too. And all of these sort of deep dives, really diving into all of the stuff and going on and on and on about it, and people listening to it for a really long time, you know, it's really, really good. And for people that really want to learn about it, and obviously it's in podcast format, so you can turn it on and turn it off whenever you want. You can listen to it while you're doing something else, and it goes a long way, you know. And there's a lot to being a really good dog trainer and training really, really good dogs. And you know, I've been around dogs since I was born, so and I've been down a lot of deep, weird roads with it, going all over the place and making all sorts of mistakes. So for me to just sit here in a freaking office and just talk about it for a while, and for you guys to listen to me go down these deep roads, it's actually pretty freaking easy and straightforward, and it can only be constructive, you know. So again, ask away and I will ramble away. It's good. Chris, where I live, in order for a dog to be certified to track wounded game, it has to pass 2 separate tests. One, fresh tracking a recently observed animal, and 2, a blood trail where 3DL blood is dripped over a fairly long, complicated track with change of direction, brakes, etc. When and how would you incorporate training of blood tracking into the blueprint? The conventional wisdom here appears to be that blood tracking should be trained and the test passed before any skin work, etc. But that seems to suggest scent training with the pup much earlier than in the blueprint. Thoughts? ? This is again getting... It is and it isn't getting well away from the blueprint. It's also bang on the blueprint. But these sort of very open-ended, wishy-washy conventional wisdom here appears to be that blood tracking should be trained before, but that seems to suggest, appears and seems, is... It's very broad and open-ended. For me to know what you are and aren't wanting to do and going to do, and what the outcomes of certain answers that I'm going to give here might be, appears and seems aren't the sort of words that I'm after. But having said that, talking about a dog tracking stuff, I can talk about that big time, and it's a huge part of what the blueprint is. Okay, let's just look at my notes here. If you want, this is first note, if you want your dog to be approved for blood tracking and it has to track 3DL blood, whatever that is, then you need to train the dog to do that. So I would just follow the blueprint to the T, everything, and I would do your skin work I would tend to do the skin work before you do the 3DL blood. I'm guessing 3DL blood, it might be 3DI, it might be 3D, there might be a typo there, I don't know. But that's literally what the question said, to track 3DL blood. I Googled it, couldn't find anything. I'm guessing, though, it's some sort of blood. That it might be you can actually buy like blood substitutes that are used in dog training and stuff like that. I'm guessing it's some type of blood, or it's blood, or that's a typo. It's blood tracking. And people talk about that, like, not doing tracking with skin and not doing tracking with different types of scent, and actually wanting to train with blood to train the dog to track the wounded animal. And again, I've talked about this at length in podcasts, Q&As, and we talk about it a lot in the blueprint. But, I would, and when you think about it, when you're working with a piece of skin that's been cut off an animal, there's a lot of scent of blood in that. So that doesn't, and there's a huge difference between there's a big difference between a deer that isn't spooked and a deer that is spooked, and a deer that hasn't been shot and a deer that is shot. And dogs can tell the difference between all four, particularly as they get more and more experienced. And it has been my experience with dogs that are well trained and that everything's tidy and you're reading the dog and working it right, and you've done all the training that's in the blueprint and the skin work and everything and all the structures right, and the dog's just in a good place and working well and you're working well with it. I've seen it over and over myself, and we've had it over and over with people that have followed the blueprint as well, where they haven't done any flash blood tracking particular stuff. They haven't used stilts. They haven't used some blood substitute. They haven't done some different type of training for specifically cold tracking or tracking blood. They've followed the blueprint and done the skin work that's in the blueprint, which, as I say, is there's the scent of blood in that because it's literally chopped off an animal. And they've shot a deer, and I've done this too myself over and over, and other people have as well. You shoot a deer in a mob of a heap of other deer, and you wound the deer, and that deer runs off with all these other deer, and that dog just goes in and hooks straight on to that wounded, stressed animal and tracks that out of the mob perfectly. I've seen it over and over. I've seen that far more often than not. In fact, I've very rarely, if ever, seen it where a dog doesn't do that. I've seen a dog try to do that and start to do that and then make a mistake and go off, and I've had to bring them back and start again. You know, they've missed a turn where the wounded deer's done a hard turn and unwounded ones have gone straight forward. And I've picked it up because the dog knows it's gone off the wounded one, and you can see them slow down and they're looking back and trying to work it out and keep going. And I go back to that point where I see their body language change or where I stop seeing blood. So it's all a handling thing. What I'm saying is it's not so much about the dog knowing, it's more of a handling thing about you knowing. Anyway, you could do all of the 3D blood tracking that you want. If you go out and don't read and handle the dog correctly, you'll still screw it up. And what I'm saying is if you do all of the training that's in the blueprint, including all of the scent work, that dog will track the wounded deer very, very well. And at the very worst, you might just have to step up to the plate and do a bit of tracking, watch where that animal goes when you fire the shot, do a bit of tracking, look around for some blood and get your dog back on the right one and circle back, put marks where the animal was when you hit it. Always mark the last blood if things are getting a little bit sketchy, and go back and start again and double back and take your time and think and work it out. But generally you shouldn't have to do any of that, and you should just ignore everything and just what's the golden rule? Always trust the dog and just follow the dog. Don't and here's the biggest thing that'll screw up a dog from tracking the right deer is either you or your mate, instead of just shut up and follow the frickin' dog. Always trust the dog. The biggest thing that's going to screw it up is you or your mate going, hang on, are you sure it didn't go over there, man? Are you sure it's not this way? It's not this or that way? Oh, what? And your dog's trying to walk. And you're sort of following it, but you're also looking out to the right and looking back and looking around all over the place. And your mate's like climbing off up the face, like, because he thinks it might have gone that way. And the dog starts wondering, well, what's he doing over there? And you're looking the other way. Just look at the dog and trust the dog and follow it up. It will gain confidence from your confidence in it, and it'll read all your body language and just commit and track properly. It's so easy to screw your dog up. So freaking easy. by the most subtle things. You can push them past, then you can push them past by being too enthusiastic. Exactly like we almost pushed my Labrador Tessa past that wounded seeker walking in through Poronui. So always trust the dog, but reading and timing and good handling at the same time. If you knock all of that stuff out of the park, it'll do it anyway. But back to the question. I would do everything that's in the blueprint, including the skin work, because a big part of that skin work is about teaching the dog the basic skills. And it is very easy. It's very easy for a dog to track a fresh skin drag, and it's very easy for a dog to take you in on a wind scent that you've set up a big chunk of deer skin on a pole, and then for the first one you take your dog around like 20 meters downwind of it and let it walk up and go, good dog. All of that, again, it's that chaining and the straight line and setting the dog up to succeed and never breaking the chain and just making it perfect step by step and just keep stacking those steps and just building and building from a dog that is a little bit sketchy and unsure, taking you in on that first big bit of fresh skin hanging on a pole like 20 meters away, to frickin' winding a deer 800 meters away in the open tops, and the wind's changing and breaking, going all over the place, but it's remembering off that first wind and taking you anyway. That's the chain, and all the steps all linked in. But that basic stuff is the beginning of that chaining of the scent work, and get the basics down with no mistakes and get the dog solid on that, and then it'll be much, much better later on. And that stuff that's in the blueprint, that basic skin work, and it goes from basic to moderately advanced. You know, we start doing skin drags of several hundred meters, and set the dog up on wind scents of a couple of hundred meters. If you're going to do your blood tracking, and you obviously know what your dog's going to have to pass in this test you're talking about. It's this type of blood tracking, and it's going to be a complicated track with change of directions, brakes, etc. If you do all of the basic skin work first, and then basically once you get to the dog to the point in the blueprint where you finish that skin work, then I would do the blood work. And I would just do exactly that, do exactly what you're going to have to do. I would set up your pure blood trail of just blood dripped over a fairly long, complicated track with change of directions and brakes, and you know where that is because you've set it up. And I would just work with your dog till it's doing it in the exact same way that we work with the dog in the skin tracking and wind work, until your dog can do it really well. I wouldn't do it sooner than what is in the blueprint, because again, that's breaking the system, and I don't know how you're going to do it or how it's going to work, because everything's all in order, and again, you go off that straight line, and the possibilities are endless. So it's very difficult for me to give a good, clear answer on that. But that's what I would do. I would follow the blueprint to the T, and I would do your blood trailing work. The stuff that you're going to need to pass the test, I would do that after the skin work. Having said that too, if you know something that I don't, or a really good reason why you should do the blood work first, maybe do the blood work first. Maybe watch the scent work that's in the blueprint. Understand how it's going to work. No doubt you'll get a few tips out of it. Use all of those same principles and do the blood work first. Put the skin. There may be something about the skin work that that is going to make the dog not have as much interest in the blood? I don't know. A big chunk of skin is potentially going to have a lot more scent than just the blood. Having said that too, though, dogs' scent is their sense of smell is so freaking incredible. And another note here, it's could be a little bit on the nose. Talk about how good my dogs are at tracking, and talk about how well the blueprint sets you up to do this kind of work. Also talk about how I've watched a lot of the tracking stuff from overseas, and it's not that hard, and their dogs always aren't that good. Occasionally, the stuff that we traditionally do with big game indicating dogs in New Zealand and the way we hunt with them, experienced operators, experienced recreational hunters, professional hunters, going right back before goat hunting and all of that sort of stuff. And, I'm talking about deer colours using indicating dogs in the 70s, and those are the guys that I first started hearing about deer dogs from, and learning about it and then doing it myself. Not in the 70s, obviously, but it goes way back, and talking about, and right up to the goat hunters doing it now, and then recreational hunters and all of that, and what's in the blueprint and everything. You're talking about like dogs that'll track an animal that's walked through a couple of days ago that's not even wounded. If you want to go that far, a lot of guys don't like doing it because the animal had walked through so long ago that they don't want to track it. and things like, I had the longest I've ever tracked a wounded animal was with fly, and it was a goat, and I tracked it for about 1 kilometre. That's the longest I've ever tracked a wounded animal. Trying to think what the longest I've ever tracked an animal just that I haven't shot, that I haven't seen yet. I'm just walking along and my dog starts tracking an animal. Probably not even, at least a K. Probably further than 1 kilometre. I know guys that have tracked animals for 8 hours. For 8 hours. That's just that was a professional goat hunter. Really good hunter, really experienced, good dogs. But what I'm trying to say here is again, on that goat that fly tracked for 1 kilometre, what was interesting about that was I tracked that goat through some really, really shitty stuff, really shitty bush. And it was actually a headshot. It was a mob of goats, and they were all out in the small clearing, a very small clearing, like 5 meters by about 6 meters. And there was about 5 or 6 goats there, and it was just surrounded by absolute shit. And I didn't have a bailing dog. Once those goats were off that clearing, I had a very slim to none chance of shooting any. I glassed them from about 200 or 300 meters away. And I snuck over to that clearing. And like the chances of shooting all of these goats is very slim. It was a relatively difficult block. It was low numbers, and there was about 5 goats there. So I was like 5 goats on this block, on a clearing, and the idea of shooting them versus the idea of them getting away, it was quite a big deal. You're talking about like a 10-day run where you might only shoot half a dozen goats, and I had 5 on a clearing, and I was just like, holy shit. And I went over there, and lo and behold, the frickin' things are still there, which was there's pretty low odds of that they're still on the clearing. Clearing completely surrounded by absolute crap bush. Like I'm talking visibilities like 5 meters, if that, and some of it you could barely even get through. You're crawling, you don't know whether to go over it or under it, just like complete horrible regrowth, regen, just absolute crap. And I got over this clearing and the goats are still there. But now what, right? Because the second you fire a shot, you think they're all going to just scatter. But I managed to get up there. None of them have seen me. None of them have heard me. And I didn't want to get any closer. So the best decision was to go for a headshot. There was a big black billy goat, and I could sort of see the parts of some other goats that are a bit closer. But this big black billy goat was right at the bottom of the clearing, right on the edge, and I just felt like if I shot at one of the top ones, he was going to go because he was right on the edge, and all the rest were going to follow him. So it's a little bit of a technique, but often goats will run away. Animals will run away from the one that you've shot. Like if goats are running one way and you shoot the front one, and the goats behind that one see that goat get hit and the bullet whacking that goat and that goat falling over, sometimes, it's definitely not 100%, sometimes that'll turn them. Or particularly if they're all standing still in a clearing, if you shoot one and it's like there's the gunshot and then that to the goat standing in that clearing, one of the loudest things is that bullet hitting that goat that you shoot and that goat falling over, and the goats think danger is that way and they won't run that way. So that was my theory behind it. So I basically shot the furthest away goat first that was standing right on the edge, and it was this big black billy goat, and I went for a headshot and I hit him and he went down instantly like I'd shot him in the brain. And it actually worked perfectly to plan. I hit him. All the other goats just heard the shot and saw him go down and thought danger was that way and turned towards me. And then I shot another one. I shot them all. A lot of luck involved. But I believe it was 4 or 5, maybe 6, but I think it was about 5. Very slim chances of getting them all. But anyway, I thought I'd shot this billy goat in the brain. And then the rest were all body shots, just shooting the best, clearest shot first. And it was just total luck. Every time I shot a goat, I'd always just shoot the only goat that I had a clear shot at. And every time I fired that shot, as I reloaded, another goat stepped out into the open and I shot that. As I reloaded, another goat stepped out in the open and I shot that. And that happened like 3 or 4 times until there was nothing left. And I should have gone and checked that billy first, but I started cutting the tail off some of the other goats. And then when I got down to the billy, he was gone. And because the headshot, I'd shot him sort of on a funny angle through the back of the head, hit him a bit low, and the bullet had gone like sort of through the side of his neck and down through and into his jaw. So that it had sort of like when you shoot them in the neck and you miss the spine, but just hitting them in the muscle in the neck sort of knocks them out. People call it creasing them. If you crease them in the neck and they go down like they've been spine shot or brain shot, but then they're basically knocked out and they regain consciousness and get up and take off. That was that goat that I tracked 1 kilometre and through a lot of really horrible stuff. It was very slow. I had to do a lot of cutting and crawling and climbing through crap and through creeks and crossing through. This goat just did a big sidle, but he sort of ended up hooking onto a bit of a goat track, and I did a lot of snipping with the secateurs, and because I was so slow getting through all the shit, the goat actually got far enough ahead of me to fall over and die, and we're tracking through, and Fly started as she's tracking, she started like locking up and pointing because the wind just happened to be right. And as we started getting closer, she started stalking and locking up because she knew we were getting close. But here's this big black billy goat laying on his side, stone dead, and his throat had swelled up to the point where it suffocated him, the poor bugger. That's why you don't take headshots, by the way. That's why headshots are a real last resort. But, so one thing, fly tracked a wounded goat for 1 kilometre. Not really a big deal. But more interestingly, I was coming back through that area about 2 or 3 days later, and I wanted to get from, and because you mark your kills on the GPS, and I actually wanted to get right back over that other side by that little clearing and up on this big main ridge from where I was, and I realised I was close to that billy goat, and I realised my best chance of getting back that way was probably the way I'd come, because that billy goat had gone down a series of goat tracks, and probably one of the best ways of getting from where he died back to where I shot him. And I went to the mark on my GPS where this dead goat was, and then I started walking along that direction, and Fly just went in front, put her nose down, and tracked back. I don't know whether a goat had walked that way, or for whatever reason, she just realised that that's where we wanted to go, or she wanted to track back to where we shot all those other goats and tailed them, whatever it was. But dogs can do that on memory too, because back in the day when I was trapping, you used to go back a year later or 2 years later, and my old Labrador Tessa and another Labrador I had years before that, I got her when I was about 14. She used to do the same thing, and they'd remember off just eyesight and just photographic memory or built-in GPS or something. A dog would take you perfectly around a trap line from tree to tree that you'd, and I'm talking like a whole day loop of 100 trees, 100 sets. They'd cut the odd corner and make the odd tiny mistake, but pretty freaking remarkably good. So some of it is on that too, just memory when you're talking about backtracking. But in this example, it was pretty clear to me that Fly tracked back tracking. And that was a good 2 or 3 days after. So I'm rambling a lot here, but and you've got this other guy that's tracked a goat for 8 hours. I've often had dogs, like I say, track sign that I reckon's old sign, old. And I've, like, we're talking about some of the stuff I've had some guys sort of say, oh yeah, but you're tracking fresh game and you're just tracking the deer to shoot it. Blood tracking's different and cold tracking's different and this and that. I've mucked around with dogs. I've been around with dogs a lot in a lot of different scenarios. And I've looked into and researched on that style of, overseas and in Europe and stuff where a dog has to be registered. What does this guy say here? In order for a dog to be certified to track wounded game, it has to pass 2 separate tests. I've seen a couple of videos where on YouTube where it's like in Germany or something in some quite well produced sort of sporting YouTube channel or something, or it might even be off some sort of hunting program, and they're going to film the registered dog handler turning up with this sort of certified dog to track a deer. And I haven't necessarily always been blown away or impressed by what I've seen. And in some cases, I've actually been like, Jesus, is that the certified dog? Because that's pretty freaking messy to me. So what I'm saying is like, and I don't want to come off arrogant here or thinking I know all about it or that we've got everything sorted here in New Zealand, or I know everything, or that we might be better, or I might be better, or anything like that. But what I'm trying to say here is, the dog that you end up with and you follow the blueprint with it, and you shoot a good few deer with it, and you follow up on a couple of deer that you shoot it, and you might wound it, and like in part 11, I think it was the second deer I shot over print, I screwed up the shot and wounded it, and then print tracked it perfectly. Over a blimmin' log and round through some shit, and he tracked it perfectly. And once you've done the whole blueprint training, and also like tracking deer, before the shot, Print's done that over and over and over. He'll track deer. He'll drive you nuts tracking deer. And so what I'm trying to say is like a dog that you've put through the blueprint, and you've done a fair bit of hunting over, you've tracked a few deer before and after the shot and all of that. If someone's wounded a deer somewhere and wants you to go in and try to track it, it'll be freaking good, man. It'll be really, really good. Like really good, and as good, if not better, than a lot of things out there, a lot of dogs out there. And if you need to do this blood tracking thing to pass the test, I think you just need to do whatever you need to do to pass the test. So you just need to get the dog doing it. And I would do that. I would do it after the skin work, to be honest. That's what I would lean towards. But maybe you want to do it before. Maybe do it before the skin work. Watch all the scent work stuff in the blueprint. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there, man, about how scent works and how your dog's going to work on it, and reading the dog and all of that. If you basically do all of that, but use blood first, just do the blood thing and get your dog used to doing that, then do the skin work as well, so your dog's got both, and then hopefully you can go and pass this test. But I find it interesting because the only reason you wouldn't do the skin work, I'm guessing, maybe, but it doesn't really make sense for several reasons, but would be so the dog only tracks blood, so it only tracks the wounded animal and doesn't track an unwounded animal while it's trying to track the wounded animal, if that makes sense. So it doesn't get distracted by an animal that hasn't been shot and starts tracking the wrong deer. Only train it on blood, it only tracks blood, so it tracks the wounded animal. But then you say here that apparently the dog has to also track a recently observed animal, and I'm guessing they're not running around like wounding animals so they can test the dog on a recently observed wounded animal. I'm guessing it's just you see an animal and the dog has to track it. So the dog has to track an animal that isn't wounded. So I can't see why the skin work would be an issue. And that's why I would probably just do the skin work first, and then I would add blood on top of that, so the dog knows it's meant to track the blood as well. The only reason I would do blood first, and maybe try the blood first, because I'm thinking about this even as I'm saying this, is I'm guessing the blood, particularly if it's some sort of, I might be wrong, I've never done it, but particularly if it's some sort of blood substitute, maybe the dog's not going to be as interested in the blood as it is in a big chunk of deer skin. So it might somehow, doing the deer skin first might sort of somehow screw up the dog's priorities. So I would probably try the blood first. Yeah. Try the blood first. I'm freaking really waffly now and going all over the place, and making it up as I go along. But I would do that. Watch all the scent work in the blueprint. Basically, do all that tracking stuff that's in the blueprint with the blood first. Make it exactly how it has to be for the test. Sounds like fairly long, complicated track with change direction and brakes. Get the dog doing that. If you're having trouble with that, maybe try the skin, but just do the blood. Make it easier with the blood until the dog can do it and get it harder and harder. But again, this is why this is so waffly and all over the place, because it's getting away from the blueprint here, and I'm just sort of theorizing a lot on this stuff. But and hopefully you can draw your own conclusions by all of my rambling here. It's hard to say exactly either way, man, because of it's getting off track. And again, it's a little bit of a guessing game for me because I'm talking about stuff I haven't done. I would do the blood first and then the skin. That's what I would start with. Jake, my GSP is going well through the training. I'm on to finishing touches with the scent training, but recently on the wind scent, he got within about 10 meters away, takes a few steps and runs in behind me. I'm not sure if I should give him a command of disapproval or not. I've just been saying nothing and continuing to push him ahead with the go command. Yeah, so what I would do there, man, I definitely wouldn't give him a command of disapproval. I probably wouldn't push him ahead either. On a wind scent, he got about 10 meters away. So I'm guessing he's taking you in and then getting close and stopping, which, if you think about it, is actually exactly what you want the dog to do, what you want an indicating dog to do. As long as he gets you to a point where he can see it, you can see it, he can see that you can see it, you can see that he can see it, you're good. So at that point, I would just go, good boy, and walk up to the skin and hold the piece of skin and call the dog over and say, good dog, good dog. You're saying you're on to the finishing touches with the scent training, but recently on a wind scent, he got within 10 meters, takes a few steps, runs behind me. I'm not sure if I should give him command of disapproval. I've been saying nothing but pushing him ahead with the go command. So you're like, go on, hurry up, go, good boy, where you go, good boy, pressure. And again, it's hard to say because I'm not there and I haven't seen it and I don't know exactly what you've done. But dogs do get sick of the skin work. They do. And dogs don't necessarily like all that fuss of good dog, good dog. And if they're starting to lose interest and you start to try and push them, they can get worse and worse. And you're saying he takes you there, gets within 10 meters, takes a few steps, and then runs behind you. Is he getting him behind you because you've like, good boy, where you go, good boy? Like, go command, and you're thinking about giving him a command of disapproval because you think he's doing the wrong thing. You're potentially getting a bit worried, like, why doesn't he want to take me in? He's my dear dog that's not going all the way to the skin. Maybe getting a bit pissed off, frustrated. I don't know. I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff out here. He's picking up on all of that, and there's a heap of pressure, and he's just clamming up on it. So that's why if a dog had taken me to the skin or to a deer, That's why, like it's why it's good to watch well ahead in the blueprint. Like in part 11, when Print takes me to that deer and just stops, the wounded deer, the wounded seeker I was just talking about, and I shoot it. We come over the brow and he's this wounded deer and I give it a finishing shot over top of Print, and now he's got his first deer, just like it's actually a second deer, but the first one I basically had to walk him right up to it. This is the first deer. Print's been in front. The first one I just saw it in the creek and shot it. Print didn't have much to do with it. This one he's actually indicated it before the first shot. Then he's tracked it, taken me right up to it, and then I've shot it over top of him, finishing shot, and now this thing's laying dead in front of him. He's just seen it alive. I've given it a finishing shot. Everything stopped, and Print's in between me and the deer, and Print's just like, holy shit, and he's just like locked up looking at it. And I don't tell him to wait. I don't tell him to sit. I don't tell him to go. I don't say, good boy, where you go? Nothing. I just wait, give him time. And then I can't remember exactly what I did there because it's a few years ago now and I haven't rewatched the blueprint in a long time. But I'm pretty sure we stand there for ages, like a minute, and he just doesn't go anywhere. He's just standing there like, holy shit, he's waiting for me, which is good. It's just good. Remember, we really want to foster that in our indicating dogs. We want them to take us in, but stop. You know, I've spoken about this a lot in the past too, where some guys are like, my dog tracked a huge seeker stag for 600 meters and he did it perfectly. It was amazing. We never would have found the deer without the dog. But when I got there, the dog just sat like 5 meters away and didn't want to go close to the deer. And we were freaking out and it was a big deal. My mate was like, what the hell? That's a shit dog. And it's like, is it? Why is it shit? It doesn't have to make love to the deer when it gets there. It's done its job. And in a lot of ways, a good dog will know that too and not necessarily be that freaking obsessed about it when it gets there. 100% granted, it's much better if the dog is more positive about it. But my point being is if it's not, one of the best ways to make it way worse is to make a big deal about it and freak out about it and be like, good dog, come on, good dog, come here. You're way better off almost ignoring it, just like carrying on as if nothing. If that happened with the dog with me and the dog took me into a scent, my note here is just talk about what I would do. What would I do? If my dog took me into the wind on a wind scent and got to about 10 meters away and just stopped, I would wait. If the dog went in behind me, I would basically ignore that and just walk over to the skin and pick the skin up and just go to walk home. It's good dog. And if the dog looked at me or looked at the skin, I'd say, good dog. And if the dog didn't, I would ignore it. Little bit of a contradiction here because so many times I talk about pressure on what you don't want, praise on what you do want. This is a little bit of a divergence away from that. You've got to be very careful with pressure on something that you do want the dog to do. It can be a delicate one. I run into a little bit of trouble with that with Miko and the retrieve because she was so freaking wishy-washy and difficult with the retrieve. I was having to do a lot of good girl. Like she'd run over to it, get to it, sort of look at it, and I'd have to right at the right time, right when she was thinking about picking it up. If I didn't say anything, she'd just sort of get there and like clam up and like walk away. I'd have to right at the right time, right when she was about to pick it up, I'd have to say, good girl, and she'd pick it up. And to get her to come right in, I'd be like, good girl, Miko, come, good girl. And to get her to bring it all the way in. And eventually she got to, and then once she started to get it, I was carrying on with too much of that, and it started to put her off. There was a turning point where I had to back all that off. And it made a big, she just got sick of the fuss. It was all too much pressure. And it was like I'd been making all this fuss to get her to do it. But eventually she got to the point where she's like, all right, I've got it. Calm down. Shut up. I get it. And if I did too much, that actually put her off. And she wouldn't do as many retrieves. And it was actually as I started buttoning off all that noise and pressure, she started to get it. She was like, okay, I get it. You're relaxing. This is starting to get fun now. And she got better again. Yeah. So that's that, man. I would just, if the dog takes you right up to it, and I've had dogs do stuff like that, and I've, worked with dogs that have, it's a big one in the retrieve, stuff like that. Just don't make a big fuss out of it, not too much pressure, calm praise, and I would just walk past the dog, grab the skin. You just doing that is telling the dog that that's what you want. And it's sort of as the dog gets there, if the dog starts to clam up and turn away, again, this is a huge freaking contradiction because I say don't praise the dog when it's unsure, but you're trying to link the skin and you getting the skin with praise. So you're not praising the dog for clamming up and trying to turn away. It's by me stepping past the dog and going towards the skin, I'm diverting the dog's attention away from moving away from the skin and pulling its attention towards moving towards the skin. And as I'm moving in and picking up the skin, and as the dog looks at me moving to the skin, I'm saying, good dog, good dog. So I'm putting praise on us moving towards the skin. No pressure. And pick up the skin. And as I'm walking away, the dog will off. If you just ignore the dog, but you hold picking up the skin and holding it, that's that action speaking louder than words. And your body language nice and relaxed and walking, you'll often find a dog that is leaning away from the skin or the bird or the whatever you're doing that the dog is clamming up about. If you're carrying that skin or that bird, the dog will often swing back and pay attention to you and look up at you and look at the skin or the bird. And that's when you say, good dog, good dog. And they'll often go from being all weird and trying to walk away from it and get in behind to reaching up and biting at the bird and the skin, which you usually want to discourage. But in this case, you're trying to encourage the dog to get into it. So you'd sort of be like, good dog, and flick the skin around a bit and get them biting it a little bit and paying a bit of attention to it. So that's how I handle that situation. Mark, I'll be picking up my new pup in a couple of weeks. She's a black lab. Where I live, -4 is common this time of year, and I'm concerned that it'll be too cold to leave her outside overnight. I'm thinking of putting her in a crate inside overnight and putting her in the kennel when it's warmer during the day. Once she is bigger and the weather is warmer, she could sleep in the kennel overnight, or is there a better option? Nah, what you said, I'm thinking of putting her in a crate inside overnight and putting her in the kennel when it is warmer in the day. Then once she is bigger and the weather is warmer, she could sleep in the kennel overnight. That, what you wrote right there, is exactly what would have been my answer of what you should do. So that's just a bit of a check-in, like this is what I'm thinking, what do you reckon? And I reckon you're bang on. And that's it, guys. That's the end of this Q&A. I've lost track of how long it is because I've started another recording, but I think it's a solid 3-hour jobby with quite a few sort of ducks and weaves in there. And that's it. A big thanks to everyone that signed up to the Deer Dog Training Blueprint and the Palmico Dog Guide. If you want to find out more about the Deer Dog Training Blueprint, or the Palmico Dog Guide as well, for that matter. That's our general dog training video series, where it's basically all of my training just put into training a pet for people that aren't interested in having a really intense hunting dog, but just want a pet that's just well trained and easy to have around. That's palmicodogtraining.com, Paumiko, Palmico. And for people that want to find out more about big game indicating dogs and the Deer Dog Training Blueprint, you can go to biggameindicatingdogs.com, and you can follow us at Big Game Indicating Dogs on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Thanks, everybody. Sorry about the issues with the sound. I'll be looking into that, working it out, doing my best to make sure it doesn't happen again. Otherwise, we'll see you next time, and we'll see you around the traps.